Yeah, it's important. I remember them teaching us that at Nimbus, like about the vibe,
About the vibe.
like setting the vibe for the
Keeping
session.
the vibes right. Yeah.
It's like kind of it's like that's paramount to almost everything else.
Mm-hmm.
To like microphone choice, to everything. Like
smell. Like I usually have like essential oils diffusing, but I like ask the people up ahead of time. I'm like, what kind of scents relax you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
great idea.
And peppermint is good when you're feeling uninspired because it's energizing.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I find if I have peppermint going, it kind of unconsciously puts you in like, let's do this, like work mode.
Okay.
Which is kind of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, to get like a little bit of a boost of energy. But I would never would have thought of doing that by smell. Like people always just go to like coffee or like...
But it's funny because I feel like artists are highly sensitive people and the senses are so imperative to inspiration and what like how things come to artists.
Big time.
That sometimes having the lights right, the smell right, just the temperature in the room can make all the difference. And I found in the heat waves, without having AC, I had to cancel sessions sometimes. Just being like, the vibes aren't there because we're not enjoying it.
We're all going to be suffering today. Like, yeah, absolutely. Not going to be able to make good music. What's your space like right now?
My space is in my apartment. So it's an older building where the patios were not to code now. So they built them in as a second room. Okay. So it's like a narrow little room that fits me and one other person. So I usually work with solo artists.
Yeah.
And I consider it more of a writing room. And the state of the projects that I work on feel really much like we're hashing out the song from beginning to end, and starts in the demo style, and then it kind of evolves into something that's more how they envision themselves. But I think it's good to leave room for experimentation and finding the sound that an artist wants. If they feel a pressure to already know who they are and how they should sound, I feel like that can almost lead you in too many directions. Setting the scene for them to feel like, oh yeah, like let's do that, let's try that, or let's see how that sounds. And even having a laugh when you pull up a tone that's just completely wrong.
Yeah.
Having those moments of like, oh, well, we know that's not it. Let's pick something else. Sure. And having an energy where we're exploring together. I think, especially when artists are making their first kind of debut works, that's predominantly the only artists I've worked with have been people that either have put things out in the past and they're completely changing it and they're doing a new thing.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Or they are like, I've always kind of wanted to do this music thing and you seem like the person to do it with. And I really like to nurture that beginning phase, because I look back to when I was a teenager writing songs for the first time. I would have liked someone to be like, hey, it's okay to not know and just enjoy making music. Like, that's
absolutely.
And through those stumbling blocks, like you do find your sound. For me, it took over a decade to, like, the project I'm currently working on for my own personal music feels like the first time I'm hearing it the way I've heard it in my head.
Oh, wow.
Like in the recording, and that's a really exciting thing.
That's a cool feeling, I bet. Yeah.
Because every artist can relate to, like, oh, like when you're in the recording process and you're kind of getting on edge and a little nervous because you're like, this isn't quite sounding how I had heard it sounding in my head when I wrote it on my guitar,
Yeah,
or
totally.
on the piano, or it's not quite right, and you still like it. You're like, still like the direction it's going, but then at the end of the day, you listen back to that track and you're like, it doesn't quite feel like the song I wrote.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is the first time where I think it took a decade of making mistakes and stumbling for me to be able to go into the studio and say, this is exactly how I want it to be, and have my reference tracks lined up and have everything very clearly aligned with exactly how I wanted to sound.
Yeah.
I got really influenced by others for years and years and years. I would say, oh, well, this is kind of how I want it to feel, and this is what I wanted to sound. And then, you know, you have a mentor or producer who goes, well, that's not really a sound that's popular right now. Or
I've heard that before. Yeah.
But like, your voice sounds really good doing this. Well, how do you know that my voice won't sound good doing what I want to do?
Yeah.
I think authenticity shines through at the end of the day. And if you really love what you're doing, it's going to resonate. So I allowed myself to kind of get pulled this way, pulled that way. And when you compromise the integrity of your art and who you are and what you love about music in order to make it successful, and you don't have success out of that, that is rock bottom. That is devastating. And you're like, I've spent thousands of dollars and thousands of hours, and I'm in the same place I started, and I have a bunch of songs that I don't love. That is soul crushing.
Yeah. That's like emptiness right there. That is like having just everything torn away. What a difficult place to be in as an artist. We talked at length with Krev last week about authenticity and about really finding yourself and really being true to who you are, finding your uniqueness. And I'm so glad you brought that up because it's the most important thing, really. Like you only get one chance to be Chloe, and no one else can be Chloe. So,
and also, like, when people show up to the gig, they want to see Chloe. They don't want to see a fabricated version of what I think they're going to like.
Right. Yeah.
And if there is an audience that wants me to play to what I think they're going to like, they're not my audience. It's disingenuine from both sides. So it's like, okay, I just want to cash in on you as a human. Like, that's weird. I don't want to touch your soul. Like, I want to just write something that's going to please your ego.
There's so much of that, though.
It is. There's so much of that,
though.
And like, you know, the difference. Like, I have had gigs where like I really like put into the art of like how I wanted it to exactly feel and how I wanted it to look, and you bleed so much energy into the outcome that you don't even enjoy the performance.
The process.
And then you look back on it and you're like, that wasn't my best show. I had the most turnout. I sold the most tickets, but I still don't feel good about it.
But still feeling like not unaccomplished, but like, you know, like you were saying, like, I'm doing this for their enjoyment, not mine, really.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm trying to think of an analogy, but it's like...
But also it's assuming you know what the audience wants.
And
And assuming that like showing your soul isn't going to be what they want to see, like, or hear. And I think you want that vulnerability, even if it makes some people uncomfortable. Like, if you're open to vulnerability and showing who you really are, that's when your audience is going to come to you. You're going to attract like with like. And So, but you have to relinquish control. And that's a difficult thing, because there will be times where, you express yourself openly and you're authentic and it doesn't quite resonate with people. And that's going to hurt, because you're like, oh, well, now I'm finally being myself and myself doesn't feel good enough, or the imposter syndrome kicks in and you're like, am I even supposed to be doing this? Do people even like it? I listen to the songs that I worked on with people, and I'm still very proud of everything I've done up until this point, because everything I've done up until this point has got me to where I currently am, and I feel like I'm more balanced in my approach. Before, it felt like I wanted to fulfill the potential that other people saw in me. And there was this pressure, like, oh, you're such a good singer. Like, why aren't you famous? Or like, those comments are the best of intention in nature, but psychologically they kind of mess with you, because you think, why aren't I famous if all these people think that that I have what it takes? And then you're like, maybe I don't have what it takes. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, is just everybody in my life lying to me? Like, do I suck?
Wow.
I think a lot of people can, a lot of artists can relate to that feeling late at night, being like, I really like my songs, but of course I would like my songs because I wrote them and it's my perspective and it's my taste and exactly what I like. Of course I'm going to love my music. But does anybody else give a flying fuck? Probably not. And you can't expect people to care. You just have to love it so much that it doesn't matter whether or not other people care. And that kind of like throwing caution to the wind energy and believing in yourself does end up attracting more people than trying to do what you think people are going to like.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's what I found in my production too, which is interesting as a producer and engineer. I haven't done many projects. It's not paying the bills, but everybody I've worked with has said, I loved working with you and I want to work with you again, because and I always get, this was the most unique recording experience I've ever had, like unlike anything else.
Cool.
And I think to myself, is that a good thing? Like, am I not hitting the mark on a professionalism level? Like, sometimes it gets in my head a little bit when I get that remark, and they're like, no, like, I just like that I feel like I'm exploring my artistry, like, when we're hanging out and we're making music. It's not, we have to hit this mark and exactly this. And I think that what a lot of producers can get caught in is like having a formula that works for them and then not knowing how to improvise. And they're like, okay, well, this is how I always do things and this is how it always works out. And it's like, but you have a whole different human right in front of you. It might have worked with the last artist, but like if you're just approaching them the same way, that's really uninspired, and like, and it makes them feel like they're just another cog in the factory. Okay, come in the door. All right, sit down. All right, we always do it this. Okay, thanks. See you later. Bye. I remember feeling that way as an artist, being like,
oh, you've had sessions like that, hey?
Well, just sessions where, I'm like, oh, I thought maybe we could try this. And I had, confidence issues back then. If I went in the person I am today, it'd be a very different thing. I think I would be able to steer the wheel a little bit more. But it's really nerve-wracking when you don't understand the world of production and engineering as an artist, coming into an environment. And of course, you're going to fall back on the expertise of the person in front of you. But if the person in front of you has gotten so locked in to exactly how they like to do things, that they don't have room for like creative exploration or trying things backwards or doing things different or just kind of having fun with it, you're potentially losing a magical moment that could occur because you're doing it the same way every time. And so, as an artist, you sometimes feel like a burden when you're like, oh, could I do this, or can we try this?
Yeah.
Or and they're like, no, I don't think that's gonna work. And you're like, okay, you don't think it's gonna work, but do you know whether it's gonna like? And if they said, oh yeah, I do know it's gonna work because of this, this, and this, because of just understanding the way that recording, the nature of recording, then yeah, that's I'd respect that. But now that I know the other side of the curtain, and that you learn the rules so you can break them, when someone wants to do something a little bit outlandish, or they want to try a sound, even if I think it's not going to work, I think it's important for the artist's exploration to hear that it doesn't work.
110%. Yeah.
Because then they're always going to be wondering in the back of their head, if I had tried what I wanted to try, would it be the song I want it to be? And a lot of the times us as engineers and producers forget that little fact, that this is their first exploration in that world of like recording, or they've done it before but they want to try it differently, and we might know, okay, that's probably not going to pan out, and yeah, it might seem like a waste of time, but sometimes it's not, like from the artist's perspective, it's not a waste of time. It's kind of closing that pathway.
Yep.
It's like the road not traveled is the one that you think about the most. And sometimes if you just let them kind of make their way halfway down that trail to go, okay, never mind, this isn't what I want, that's enough for them to then trust you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you have to be open to trying things and experimentation, and as an artist and as the producer in the session, leaving room for mistakes. Like you were saying, like listening back to those takes where someone was off key or tried a weird note and then laughing about it together and being like, okay, well, that's not within your range, but we've tried that and that's okay. And it goes for so many things in life, like dating, like date a lot of people and find out what types of personalities you don't like, so, and don't just marry the first person you meet, you know what I mean? And like experiment and get out there and try things. Completely.
And that's also why, like, I've had people I've worked with and then they end up going to work with someone else after, and you know, your ego is just kind of like, oh, that kind of hurts a little bit, oh, maybe they didn't like working with me. But I think it's every artist's right to explore who they collaborate with and how, and I've had people go to work with somebody else and then they come back and it's like, oh, I tried dating somebody else and I didn't like, you know, like, I didn't like them.
Great.
and it's, or they're just like, oh, I'm realizing I'm missing that element of just conversation, and like it might seem counterproductive, but I'm also the kind of person where it's like I can feel the vibe of the artist like the moment that they sit down sometimes, and I can just be like, we could set up the vocal mic and do a vocal day today, but I don't think you're in the headspace for the vocals today. And they'll be like, oh, fuck, how did you know? You know, like I'm not feeling very good about myself today. And especially on vocal day, you've got to feel confident.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Like that's the days that psychologically is the most intimidating. And I find sometimes springing a vocal day on somebody when the vibes are like hitting and things are going really well, and being like, I've already got the vocal mic like locked in my settings here, like just give me 5 minutes, let's do it. They're like, you know, and they get a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit scared, but that like buzzing energy sometimes just brings out that like one take wonder that, you know, they weren't prepared, but emotionally I could feel like they would get the right performance out of it.
Something about the spontaneity of that moment and that pressure can sometimes bring out something really special too.
Yes. Well, also, you know, when like you kind of hit a point where you kind of built up the track enough that you can do the vocal at that point. You still could probably add more elements so that they have, but you see in your peripheral the way that they're bopping along and kind of smiling to themselves. And you're like, oh, they're feeling the magic right now. They're feeling connected to the song right now as it is. That's when they're going to sing it real natural. And then sometimes artists can't help themselves. They're singing along already as you've gotten to that point. And you're like, okay, if they can't help but hum it to themselves or start singing it already, let's just try a vocal take. And even if they're not warmed up enough or it's not quite right, okay. But I'm glad we tried it and now we have a rough. And so while we're listening and adding more elements, it's this rough is better than the last. But there have been times where we've gotten all the vocals done in a day that we didn't have the vocal day scheduled. And I think allowing it to be free form like that, and kind of open to, like, we're just making music. Like, this isn't rocket science. Like, yes, there's an element of technicality to making sure that the sound is going in the board right, or in the computer basically now. But like, the moment I found as an artist, like, I never liked what I did was when I was like locked into how it should be, or the process, how the process should go. Currently right now I have to finish my final vocals on the songs that I've done in the studio, because we did them live off the floor, the tracks, and now I want to go in and do my vocals a little more pristinely. And I keep unconsciously putting it off. Yeah. Such a vocalist thing to do. Oh, I'm sick. Oh, I can't. You know? And like, a part of me just wants to just one day when I'm just on a lazy Sunday or home, just load it up and just do it and not think twice about it. Oh, like, I want to make sure I like really dial it in perfectly. And I've had sessions where like it's been the tones and like what's going in has been dialed in perfectly for my vocal, and then I do a terrible take and it makes no difference. And then I've had times where like the settings weren't perfect, but the vocal take was right there, and you don't even notice the difference after doing a little bit of processing on the back end. Yeah. Remembering that where audio came from, like how it started in its rawest form in analog, were not perfect conditions ever, to say the least. Like, and some of my favorite recordings are not perfectly recorded at all. And if you're striving for perfection in your settings, you're kind of not allowing for like magical moments to happen.
And we as an audience, or as just consumers or music fans, we look past those imperfections like instantly. Yeah. Like, some of those amazing timeless records from the 50s and 60s are like distorting, like the vocals, like they're screaming into the mic, and before they even had compressions, you know, in the 40s and 50s, like the engineers like riding the fader as compression, and oh shit, she got really loud there. But that record's still amazing because the performance at the end of the day is what really matters. The artist was connected. They were connected, like right into it. Yeah. And like, I find also I loved audio school, but one of the things that I found so mind-bogglingly just uninspired about it was spending the majority of the day getting everything just so, and everything just perfect, and then having like 45 minutes to actually make some music. And like, I understand that that's the world and that's like how it's been built up, but I think they were teaching us how to make it perfect so that we can break the rules. But looking back at that, I was like, I just wanted to make more songs. Like, I think see my projects from school, and I'm like, there's just not all that meat and potatoes to the projects that I did in school. I wish I did a lot more actual
just tracking.
Yeah. I'm sure you had days where you guys were setting up 16 microphone drum kits.
Yeah.
And it was like literally 4 hours of running cables.
Yeah.
And setting up mic stands.
Yeah. Oh, and then hitting the drum and being like, oh, it's not even tuned right. You know what I mean? And then you're being like, what? Let's try a piece of gum.
Yeah.
Let's try this on there. And like,
just hours of fussing and fussing and fussing. And I get where you're coming from, and you bring up a good point, and it's important, like, to understand the fundamentals, and understand those rules and then those techniques and where it all started, so that we can break those later on and get experimental with it. But for a lot of us, like for me personally, someone who's like doing hip hop and R&B, like there's not really a lot of live drums to begin with. Like 90% of it nowadays is just sample based, and someone throws a vocal on it. So it was cool for me, but it was also like, I don't know if I'm going to even be using this technique. Like,
well, and like I haven't, in my projects with artists, like, I haven't done live drums because there hasn't been necessarily a need to. It's very kind of just folk based, and the like what you can program nowadays with samples like sounds pretty good enough, especially when it's like a simple production. Also keeping in mind budget, and that's also what it is. It's a lot of the artists that I work with, they just don't have financial backing. They're financially backing themselves. That's kind of the nature of things, the DIY artist.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, okay, how can we work with this very limited budget? And one of the first things you cut is doing live tracking of in the room. Unless that's a huge priority for them, then you find a way to wiggle the budget in other areas. But the old school way of recording obviously feels amazing and feels great, but for me to do my project the way I'm doing it and putting out next year, like, music didn't pay for that. Like, me working as an onboard host on a train is what paid for my project. And I was a little bit kind of disillusioned by the whole grants, and I had applied for them and it just not hit, and you kind of have to have everything just so and perfectly laid out to get any funding. Yeah,
it's tough.
And there's nothing perfect about what I do, and I'm not a social media heavy artist, and I don't ever think I want to be. Like, I like my life the way that it is right now. Like, I just and so I just realized I'm like, I'm not what people in funding worlds or are looking for. And it's okay to realize, like, I don't have what it takes in that realm. It's not, if I really applied myself and I wanted that, yeah, sure, absolutely, I could probably do it. Like, there's nothing you can't do when you set your mind to it. But I don't want that life. And that was a really hard realization. And I gave up kind of pursuing music for a while, because I felt like, oh, well, if I don't pursue it the way that everybody says is the way, like, to get success and to, to build up a career, and if I'm not doing it the way all my peers in the industry are doing it, that, oh, maybe I can't do it. Maybe I shouldn't be doing it. I forgot that little girl who started singing just because she liked it. And the teenager
got too far away from that, eh?
The teenager who wrote songs to express herself, and those songs resonated with people. And coming back to and making this project for me was fulfilling my heart's desire on a personal level, and just being like, yeah, I'm not doing it the way other people do it, or the way that the industry says is the way to go about it. And it's very likely that it won't have the success due to that. Like, due to the fact that I'm not doing it, not doing the normal way about going about things. Right. But do I go about it the way that I know is the industry way and is right, and be deeply unhappy and depressed and not fulfilled on a personal life level? Or do I just do it the way that feels good to me? And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, at the end of the day, I still have something that is me, that I'm extremely proud of. And it's a hard lesson to learn when the whole world tells you, and all the people around you tell you, like, you really got what it takes, you can do this. And you're like, I might have some ingredients to have what it takes, but I don't have that ingredient of compromising my sense of self to be successful. Yeah. And I hope people resonate with my songs that I'm putting out, and I'm going to do some, PR work, and I'm going to, give it some legs and give it what it takes to make the most out of it. But I have gotten to a point where it's like, it's okay to change your mind. I thought that I really wanted to be this, like, credible, reputable artist, and like that would be great at the end of the day if that's what comes out of it. But I changed my mind on pursuing it the way that I know from my music business schooling and being at Nimbus and seeing what works for people. I'm like, I don't want any part of all that. Yeah. Like, and that's just on a personal level. That was a hard thing for me to come to, was like, ooh, who I am doesn't really fit in that world. And that's an interesting thing. But then you hear about those, exceptions to the rule, the people who kind of just make music and then it sticks and it works and they find an artist and they're kind of quirky and kind of out there, like Mac DeMarco, and you're like, oh, that's kind of sick, but you can't go into it thinking I'm going to be the exception to the rule.
No, that's like winning the lottery. That's not the attitude.
No, but you hear those stories. You hear those like underdog stories of like, yeah, I just made a song and then millions of people heard it.
It happens. People blow up overnight.
Yeah. But you can't think that that's what it's going to be without.
Don't aim for that. How about that?
Yeah. Without like the legwork of like marketing yourself and doing the social media campaigns and pushing things. And so yeah, I've kind of just come to a place where I'm like, I'm going to make songs that I really love. And at the end of the day, like, I have a record that I love listening to. Yeah. And if other people love listening to it, great.
That's a bonus. To sort of add to what you said a few minutes ago about, not making the music you want to make because you're trying to fit within a formula and please other people. And then at the end of that, also having it not be a success, you're ending up with like a double negative, like 2 failures. When if you are making the music you want to make, that makes you feel good, that you are genuinely passionate about during that journey, that's a win no matter what. That's a guaranteed win.
It's a guaranteed win.
So you get at least one.
It's like a soul fulfillment moment.
There you go.
And like, we're on this weird flying rock and life is not forever. And, to look back on your life and be like, oh, I didn't make the record because I didn't think it was going to be popular, or I didn't think it was going to, that's devastating. Yeah. Like, that's no faith in yourself and doing it just because you can and you have one life and you love music. That should be the only answer, like, in your heart, is like, oh, is it going to be good? Is it worth the money that I'm putting into it? And like, well, if you're viewing it on that scale of like, is this going to cash in for me? Like, is, bleeding, thousands of dollars into a passion, is that, is it going to work out in the end? Is it going to make me money back? It's like, oh, so you see your art as a financial investment then. You don't see your art as a self-expression any longer. And so people see it as innate failure when they don't make the money back that they put into the record.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't make the money back. Only the exception to the rule, the huge artists.
Oh yeah.
You
for sure, most people that are making music at the level that I'm working with are working day jobs and not making money from shows, that's for sure. But they're like performing, they're out there like 46 Spotify monthlies.
Yeah. Well, and at Nimbus, what did they say? Don't do it for the money. Like that was literally day one.
Oh, really? I didn't get that speech.
It was like the intake day. We're like sitting there and we all got our binders and all the little package of the backpack and the hard drive, and they're giving us a speech and then they go, all right, so this will wean out some people, like, don't do it for the fame or the money. And I was like, sick, cool. Like, I'm not doing it for that. And then, but I was 17 years old when I went to Nimbus.
Oh, wow. Were you still in high school?
I had finished high school a couple months early to go into the spring intake.
Incredible. Wow.
But that was that was a detriment to me because I was seen as a little girl. And I didn't find my voice or my legs, so to speak, in that world because I didn't trust myself. I was like, oh, I'm perceived as this kind of young girl who doesn't know better. Maybe I don't know better. And I couldn't go to the mingles and like the networking because they're all at bars.
Oh, right. Yeah, you did miss out on those.
Yeah. And so I kind of, it was a weird world to jump into that young, but I wouldn't have done it any differently because I think that I learned kind of the nature of how things are a little bit sooner. So it wasn't this like devastating world shattering moment like in my late 20s. Like I feel like I had that existential crisis like at 20. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, a lot of the culture of the music industry is sort of revealed to you when you're at school there, and you get a chance to see a lot of the ins and outs and maybe like discover where you do fit in as an individual. I know for me, I had already kind of made the decision I didn't want to fulfill a career as a rapper anymore, and I was focusing on engineering and things like that, and finding fulfillment in that. But school reinforced that even further.
Yeah.
Where it was like, okay, I'm getting a lot better sense here, like seeing what it's going to take to become a successful independent artist. And I don't know if that's for me. And I'm like you know, I was a little bit older, but I'm glad I kind of figured that out in my early 20s. And, that I'm grateful for that. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. And I read the other day that Nimbus is no longer.
Yeah, I just found that out. Actually, a couple days ago that they are bankrupt.
Closed their doors. Yeah.
Pretty severely.
I think COVID had a big part in that. Because you can't have people in the room recording together. That's the whole appeal of that school.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just being at the board with the instructors and setting up those 16 mic drum kits.
Those were some of the best days of my life, though. Like in like those overnight sessions that you'd book.
Oh, totally. Sleeping on the baffles and stuff in Studio C and pulling all-nighters and then going to class. Such good memories of doing that. Yeah, and the camaraderie and like the feeling of getting a feel for like studio etiquette and like what it's like to be in a room with people for hours and hours and hours, and
Yeah.
then like you start to smell everyone's BO, and but
Yeah.
you're like, okay, we're still working on this record.
We're
Like,
still going. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's really fun. It's like
It's
it
fun.
is a great time.
yeah,
But yeah, it's funny because like I learned the old school approach to making records just to find out that I'm like I'm not an old school girl.
mhm.
Like I'm in the future now, and it's like it's not like, oh, I'm sampling or doing, you know, really electronic production. That's not what I mean by saying I'm a new school girl. But I think that the hierarchy and the rules to things, and, you know, don't speak unless spoken to, and where's the collaboration in that? Like, I never liked that approach.
Oh yeah, and they had the sign on the door that said engineers or keep your mouth shut or something like that at all times, or something. I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but it was like very
But also it's like
strict.
just common sense. Like the fact that you have to put on like this sign, like don't speak, like if you have an idea, is kind of like, okay, well that's for the one person who doesn't know how to shut up. That shouldn't be, you know, that shouldn't be the rule for everyone going into a creative field where it's all about collaboration. Because I remember just being intimidated and being like, I don't feel good about this.
Yeah,
And
I
it
can see
also
that.
steered me away from pursuing a career as an engineer in a studio. I was kind of like, I'm a girl. People already don't really listen to me. I'm just going to be ordering coffees and running cables. And that's not why I did this. And if I'm making no money anyways, why would I do something that's going to be soul crushing to me, where it's like, don't say a word, don't do a thing, just be happy to be here. What? You know, like, and I don't know. I think that I just realized, like, I want this, but I don't want this that badly. And I had to pivot. And so I've got my little home studio, and I invite people in, and I don't think that it's proven that old school way works, and it works for a lot of people, and it brings a lot of people success. For the people it works for, it's because it works for them, and they're able to work in that world, and that's fulfilling for them. But I caught on pretty quickly that it wasn't fulfilling for me. And that was a moment where I was like, where the imposter syndrome really snuck in. And that's what made me feel motivated to create my own thing. And I'm like, okay, so I'm always going to have a different career on top of music, very likely. Like, not the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
I'm seeing myself as the rule. And if the exception comes in, cool, great. But I realize the way that I choose to go about things and the way that I like making music isn't going to be a huge career unless, you know, by some miraculous chance that the way I go about doing things inspires the people I work with, and more people come in, and then it starts to take over. But when I was pushing myself and hustling and grinding to be like, this is going to be my only source of income, I fucking hated it. I hated every moment of it. I would be sitting there staring at editing of a song I liked and an artist that I liked, and being like, I don't want to fucking do this. And I think it was for me that connection of like, oh, I never started music to make it my career. I just did music because I liked it. And I know that my approach is not inspiring maybe for the people who are pursuing production for the career aspect of it. But I think like it's important to have that perspective of like, yeah, it's not gonna be for everyone.
I'm in the same boat as you, like 100%. Like, I hear everything you're saying. And you know, I've been making records for 20 years, because that was when I started actually writing lyrics and figuring out how to set up a microphone and, and then recording my voice and sending it to girls on MSN to try and impress them with my cousin.
Yeah.
And then one thing led to the next. But I've been doing that for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
But then actually pursuing mixing as like a craft for like a little over 10. But what you said a minute ago about being in the mind state of trying to make it your full-time gig and hustling and being so stuck up with this idea of, my life's goal is to get rid of my day job so I can make music full time, and somehow that's going to fulfill my ego and make me feel like I've made it.
Yeah.
I thought that was what making it meant, was that I quit my day job, I get to make music full time. And I was working on a lot of stuff that I liked, but more stuff that I didn't like. And I was just, saying yes to every single session that came through. And so many of those were like just made me sad.
Yeah.
It made me so sad that here I was, someone who had devoted their life to music.
Yeah.
And I don't say that lightly. Like when people devote their life to music, that is all you do, that is all you think about, all your spare income goes towards equipment and speakers, and I've devoted my life to music for 20 plus years. And here I'm having people come in that have never been to a studio, that have no lyrics written, that are just like trying it out.
Yeah.
And it's just 2 hours of fucking wasted time, and they don't even have a beat ready to go, and I'm just like sitting there just feeling disrespected. What the fuck are you guys doing?
But they're paying you.
They're paying me, but that didn't matter. It wasn't about the money.
That's the way they see it.
That's the way they see it. People would say that too, like, oh, but you're getting paid. Like, I thought it was okay if I just came here and like smoked and like, no, you can do that with another engineer.
Yeah. You're like, I'm here to make music.
I'm here to make music. I'm here to make records at the end of the day. Like, that attitude, I think, didn't gel well with a lot of people. And but I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm living my truth now more than ever.
Yeah.
And I've
is
come
that
to
what made you switch to mixing?
No. I mean,
No?
I've been mixing professionally for other people for as long as that or longer.
Yeah.
Even before I went to Nimbus, I was, recording and mixing for other people when I lived in Victoria, before I moved to Vancouver. So it's been a long time, but it was just like, I don't want to make this a grind. I don't want to make this just like a 9 to 5, like
clock in, clock out.
Artists coming through the door.
Yeah.
Just because I'm a session engineer.
Yeah.
And I need to pay the bills. Like, fuck that.
Yeah.
If I'm not making the music I want to make, and if you're not treating me respectfully, you're not respecting the session, your time, my time, the art, get out.
Well, and you find that when you get in that wheel of just kind of saying yes to what comes in, you're just going to get more of that. Because what's your resume going to be? A bunch of that. And that's going to attract those kind of people.
Oh, and it did.
Yeah. And
through the grapevine. Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, yeah, maybe I just need to have a different career that has nothing to do with this, or, works in on a specialty that actually brings in some money. And so I can say no and then work on those artists who I believe in, who are going to attract more of those kind of artists to me. Yeah. Because, we all hear each other's stuff, like in the community, and artists that I've like gotten to know and played gigs with. When I hear a new song come out of theirs and I really love it, I think, who did this with them? And if I'm thinking that, other artists are thinking that. So on a production side, I'm like, okay. So if I work with someone who I believe in, Isabeau, the girl that I've done a single with, Trippin' in Love, we just got along really well, and we had great energy, and we wrote a song together and produced it. So from top to bottom, And she said, like, a lot of people really like the song, really like the writing,
Yep.
and they think that this is a good reflection of me. And, you know, my friends who are songwriters really liked this song. For me, that's music to my ears to hear that other musicians in her life like that song.
Absolutely.
And that makes me feel closer to who I want to be as a producer, which is just doing songs that the artist makes the artist happy and makes me happy, and feels like a representation of our collaboration, and that will bring more in. And but it's a hard lesson to learn. Like when you go, you're like, oh my God, like I'm finally working all the time at music, but I hate it. Do I hate music? Like, I had a moment where I was like, I didn't want to listen to a goddamn thing when I finished. And the whole reason I started music was because I loved records. I loved listening to music. And if you get to the point where you're so uninspired by what you're doing, you're not listening to new stuff out there, or even the classics that you love at the end of the day.
That's so funny. I went through that phase too.
Yeah. And you're like, oh. Or you also get into the mind warp of like only listening to your own stuff, like, or the stuff that you're working on, because you're like, oh, I gotta stay locked in and like always just listen to what it is that I'm working on and like see where to tweak it. But giving your ears a break and listening to stuff that inspires you and then coming back to it can be really good. Like, there are times where I'll just put a record on and, you know, start cleaning the house and I'll start feeling it, and a moment will come and I'll be like, ooh, I really like that. I forgot that how much I liked that point in the song, like where the bridge comes in, or I'm going to steal that. You know, I'm not gonna use the exact chord progression and like refabricate the same song, but the way that pops in, the way that lands in, I'm gonna take that little nugget.
Absolutely,
and I'll sometimes write an entire song in a day because of I was cleaning the house and Bob Seger came on, and ooh, the way he sang that made my heart sing. You know, I want to have a taste of that. And then the house doesn't get cleaned, but I have a song. And I think that there are artists and you know, musicians and producers and engineers out there that, you know, they're living their life and music is always going to be a part of it, but it's not necessarily going to fulfill them for it to be just something that makes money for them. And that's okay. Like, I think there's a lot of rhetoric in like the hustle culture.
So much. Oh God.
Which like puts so much mixed messaging to people that like, oh, if I'm not loving this, is there something wrong with me?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm not like enjoying my career in music, I worked so hard to get to the top of this mountain, and now I can't, like, it's like getting to the top of a hike and it being a smoky day and not being able to see the lookout. You're just kind of like, I'm so clouded right now. I can't even enjoy the fact that I've made it to that point that I thought was going to make me happy and fulfilled by making music every day and making money from it. Like, I had the blinders on thinking that was just going to make me feel fulfilled. And then I was finally making money at it and I was like, no, I don't like this. Like,
I don't like that word, hustle. Like, it just has like a negative connotation, or it just, like, we work fucking hard. Like, as artists and producers, like, there's our work ethic is not in question, but this word hustle just means like, to me at least, it just means like mindless grinding towards like the goal that you think that you're supposed to be aiming for, or that society expects of you to like be a successful like chasing, like in the rap world, they call it chasing paper or whatever it is. And it comes from, I think a lot of it comes from like, rap, like, hustler mentality, selling drugs, songs about selling drugs and that culture and all of that. And that's fine. Like that's those people's lives. That was them telling their story. Like that's hip hop. And that's beautiful. That's them. But like, don't feel like, you need to be that, or that like for some, that don't glamorize that as well. If that's not who you are, or if that's not like, I'm like a upper middle class white dude from Victoria. Like, I don't know what hustling means. You know what I mean? I know what it means to work hard. I know what it means to be passionate about something, but like, what is this word?
But what does this mean? Well, also, I think it starts to breed this correlation between your artistic value being like intrinsically linked to your monetary value. Yeah. And then people think, oh, well, if I'm not monetarily valuable in my field, then I must not be artistically valuable. Like,
wow, yeah.
And that's where the also imposter syndrome comes in too, because you're like, oh, no one's streaming it, or no one's, like I'm not making any money, but at the end of the day, you love it, and okay, maybe it might only be 100 people streaming it, and that's kind of sad, but those 100 people, I'm sure they love it. There's a reason they're streaming it. And it's but it's a kind of like world-shattering realization that a lot of artists go through, because like or producers or engineers, where like for every one success story there are, like, monetarily there are thousands upon thousands, millions even, where the music is great. Yeah. Oh yeah. And nobody knows about it, and like, why have I not discovered this artist? Why are they not like the biggest thing out? Yeah. That happens to me all the time. And understanding the fickleness of it. Yeah. Take the pressure off yourself. Like, but people don't want to hear that, because they're like, oh, then I need to have a side job, and that means I'm selling out. Like, I've given up on the dream. If I do a career in something else, it's like, well, you're not giving up on the dream if you're still doing music. If you're still doing the thing, yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think often about the connection maybe between like the success or making it in the music industry and the success of trying to be getting numbers on social media and YouTube and things like that. And since I've had demoed a limo on YouTube for a while now, and like I kind of keep track of that, and looking at the analytics, I'm looking at the views, and I know how much work I'm putting into this. Like I put into music, like I put into everything that I care about, like everything. I put everything into it. And it makes me think about like what is going on here? There's some sort of there's like a game. There's a algorithm. There's a formula out there that's working for some people and not working for other people. Yeah. And I don't even know if it has to do with the quality of the content. I think it actually has to do with how well they're playing the game. Oh yeah, how well they're playing a game, but also just sometimes it's kind of just fluke too. Like they're playing the game really well, and then it gets in the right person's ears. And like you could be playing the game exceptionally well and building like natural progression of listeners and like building your viewers on social media and getting people behind you, and it kind of just plateaus and it just stays there. And you're like, what can I do? But like the day you see me trying to make a viral TikTok by like making a dance or something, like please just put me out of my misery. Because like pull the plug. Like I understand the aim. Like I can see the way that TikTok is making big artists, and I'm like, that would be great if I could do that, but it's just not me. Yeah. And I find it, once again, kind of soul crushing if I compromise that point of myself and then the TikTok gets 5 views. I'm like,
yeah, that's the double
that
negative we
feels
talked
so
about
cringy,
earlier.
you
Oh
know?
yeah.
I finally did the thing that I really just don't enjoy. And like I'm on TikTok. I like put songs up, but it's more just setting the phone up, playing a song that I've written, because it also keeps it tangible somewhere where I can go back to it and get some people into my socials. But I see the hustle and the nature of like people who are looking to go viral and who have gone viral. And I think that's really inspiring. That's really cool that they can do that. They're the kind of person who can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the kind of person who can do that, because it just does not feel authentic to me at all. And for them, it is authentic. They want it. They want it more. And it kind of confuses me saying that, because I'm like, yeah, I really want this too. Like I work at music all the time, but my want is fueled from just wanting to continue to write songs and wanting to continue to resonate with myself and feel fulfilled in life. My want is not like clinging to like, I want so badly to be heard. Like I want so badly to be seen, so that, you know, it makes this all feel all this effort worthwhile.
Yeah.
The effort's worthwhile, whether you, like already, because you're pursuing something that makes you happy.
That should be what it's about. It should be about the journey.
Yeah.
The process of making it, really. Because then you're winning no matter what. You're enjoying it in the moment. Yeah.
But like for me, I'm like, oh, like even if I had someone behind the scenes like being my like marketing manager and being like, okay, we got to do this TikTok, like that, that would free me up enough to be able to do it. But would I still enjoy fulfilling those tasks? Like probably not. Like and so a lot of artists also get in like, I just need management, or I just need a label, like I just need people behind me, because like I'm just not naturally good at those things. I just need somebody else doing it and managing me, so I can do the art.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, the reality is once you have somebody managing you, they're just managing you and able to not do the art. Like, you know, they're just telling you where your mark is.
Yes.
and to do that. So it's like you're still doing the things that you thought management would take over and do for you, because you're the artist and like you have to be present and visible. And that was when I was just like, oh crap, because I just thought, okay, once I have like some management and people who believe in me, like that, it's gonna lift off, and I can just be the artist that I want to be. But that's not how it works, especially with like 360 deals and you know, the nature of the industry and how hard it can be. Like I remember in school some close friends of mine getting on to labels or getting management, and us having that coffee chat being like, you've done it, like, you know, and being like so excited, and then meeting up with that person 2 years later and then being like, my album hasn't been released.
Oh wow.
They're holding on to it. Like they don't, it's just they keep waiting for the moment that it's going to feel right, or at least like it's going to be successful. That's, oh God, like that would suck, like being left high and dry. Like you're like, okay, I've got this management, I've got this label, like I'm gonna make it. Like this, it's gonna be, people are gonna hear my art, and I've got people behind it pushing it, and then those people behind it who believed in you initially don't believe in it enough to even let it see the light of day. What a waste of funds. And oh wait, that's recoupable? I'm not out of this deal until I make that money back. Oh, on a song that never got put out. Woof.
Talk about stress and pressure and like vibe kills. Like,
and it's just, so you hear those stories too, and you're just like, okay, so maybe it's not the worst thing in the world that I didn't, you know, management didn't hit me up, or labels didn't see the success in it. And now knowing myself better after the decade of pursuing music and giving up on it in the middle and then coming back to it, I feel like I've come back to myself and come back to a place of like, oh, I'm doing this for me.
Good. That's so cool.
But it's not inspiring. It's not an exciting story to tell. And I know that. You know, when people in my life hear the songs who aren't in the music industry and don't understand kind of how tough it can be, and they go, but why aren't you trying?
Why aren't you?
Like, yeah, like, why aren't you like pushing it to the limit? Like, you know, I get people like, why aren't you just playing a gig every day and like putting yourself out there and like hitting the pavement? Like, you've got what it takes. Like, why are you just like just enjoying the process and sitting back and like not taking it seriously? Like, they think I'm not taking it seriously the way that I'm approaching it. And I'm like, no, like, I'm approaching it in a way that still at the end of the day, I'm happy with myself and I'm not depressed and like, you know, pushing myself beyond the point of enjoying it any longer. And they're like, but why? And I can't explain why.
Yeah.
Like, I just know it in my being. I'm like, I tried it and I didn't like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, especially for someone who maybe isn't pursuing anything creative to understand that. It's easy to say, you know, like, oh, just give it your all, or just put yourself out there, do a show every day. But it's like, it's not what makes me happy.
Compromise, like, keeping the lights on and feeding yourself for the dream. Like, you know, like I just, because I got to the point where I was making like enough to survive on music. But I wasn't happy with simple survival. Yeah. Like, there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like the pyramid.
Oh, I haven't heard about that.
So it's like the bottom of the pyramid is like safety and security. So like health and having a home, you know, and you can't find self-fulfillment until you have those tiers below. So the top of the tier is like self-actualization. Okay. And I was not hitting the bottom tier of the pyramid, like financially speaking, to the point where like I felt like I had some expendable income to go on that vacation I deeply needed, to have some TLC, to see my friends and family and not feel like I had to be in the studio or had to be, you know, working all of the time, or, you know, not like, there was just a lot of parts of my life where I missed out on a lot of milestones, like with my family and with my friends. And I thought, it's all going to be worth it. It's all going to be worth it. But I was never fulfilling my safety and security pyramid. So I was never going to get upper tier. Yeah. And I realized that, like, in our economy, especially a post-COVID world, it's extremely hard for our generation right now. And I'd like to own a home one day. And I would rather, just with my mentality, work another job and be able to do that in 5 years, as opposed to just continuing to grind at music and making just enough but not expendable income enough, and then be grinding for 10 years to accomplish that same amount. I would like to feel safe and secure and not stressing all the time. And that was a tough realization, because I think back to like my 18-year-old self, when people would be like, well, what's your plan B? Or like, what do you do? I
remember hearing that too.
And being like, you don't understand. And now I think back to that and I'm like, they just cared. Like, they kind of had an idea of how hard this was going to be. Right. And if I had had a plan B all along for a career, like, yes, that wouldn't have been the journey that's brought me here. I think that it's brought me here so I could have this realization. But damn, would have been nice to, you know, have some school or accreditation in something else that was just going to really set me up for success and pay the bills. Because now I'm 31 and I don't have those skill sets in those career paths. And going back to school, do I financially want to spend 5 years paying for school and not working as much?
Yeah.
And then having debt, and like, do I really want to do that again right now at this point in my life? And that was a bit of a detriment as well.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it can happen. You're never too old to like go back to school or
No.
to even continue at your education of what you're already into.
Yeah.
But it's a tough pill to swallow when you feel like, you know, you are in your 30s and you've already put so much into getting here.
Yeah.
And it's just like the thought of like, that, in a way, it almost feels like not starting over, but like starting from the beginning again, like a little bit.
you feel behind. Like,
I feel behind, yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, like my peers who like didn't pursue arts are looking real good right now, you know? And it's kind of funny. I'm like, oh, they've got their like, they're set up and they're not worrying for anything. But it was also all part of my journey. And I wrote a song about that, you know, disillusion. It's called Get It Right. And it's going to be on this album. And this whole album is literally like songs from the last decade of my life. And all the mistakes I made and all of the successes and in love and life. And if all that confusion and frustration and feeling like a failure could breed anything, I'm very happy that I expressed it through music, and I'm really proud of that music. It's the best music I've done. So I feel fulfilled, but in a kind of ironic way, did I have to struggle that hard though?
Yeah, I know. It's sometimes I feel like I could have worked smarter,
Not harder. Yeah.
Like I was stubborn as hell in a lot of ways, and just how I approached things, and like I was in that hustle mentality that I hate so much. Like for sure I was for a long time, and put myself through hell. But that's so funny that you're doing that. I'm in the middle of doing the same thing, like putting out a solo album,
Nice.
which is actually songs that some unreleased shit from Nimbus that I recorded there when I was like I like to think like the peak of my MCing, when like my flow was the best, and using the good mics at school and stuff. And like, so I've gone and found some of those verses and, you know, reached out to local producers and got beats and that matched the BPM, and piecing things together of like sort of the last 10 years of my life, and recorded some new things with my setup here. So yeah, it's just about it's about nostalgia and sort of a reflection of the last 10 years, really. So I'm looking forward to hearing your album when it comes out, and seeing what kind of things we have in common there.
Yeah. Well, it's like a coming home to almost of like why you started in the first place, you know, and that passion. But it's at the time, like when I was going through it, yeah, I had the same kind of mentality of like, but I'm different. But I'm special, you know?
Yeah.
And then when you realize like, you're special because you're a unique human being, and there's only one of you. Yeah, like you're special. But like, you don't have this innate special ingredient that's going to make you more successful,
right?
None or less. Like, and you can push yourself to that limit and keep pushing it and be deeply unhappy the entire time, and then get sick, or like, you know, life end too soon. Like sometimes I have to just come back to the realization that my life as it is a blessing, and I have my health and my happiness, and remember that fact when I'm feeling like I'm not fulfilling some kind of potential that was like laid out for me through my talents or my gifts. I have to remind myself that, okay, it's not worth getting to the point where you don't enjoy your day-to-day life. Your day-to-day life is your life. Like, your life is happening right now. And if you're so stuck in needing this like innate success or needing it to pan out to the point where you're not enjoying your day-to-day life or the people in it, or like, that kind of hustle is not worth it to me.
I 100% agree. Yeah. Do you ever sit in your studio and just take a moment and look around and think, wow, like, this is pretty cool?
Oh yeah.
Because you take it for granted every day. When you walk in there and you sit between the speakers and you're just like, you're working. But then I have those moments when here and I think back to a younger me with my, before I had speakers.
Yeah. Yeah.
With my white
just
MacBook.
using your little headphones. Yeah.
And I didn't even have a desk. I had like a mouse and I would use it on my knee, and I had like my MacBook on some makeshift fucking shelf in my bedroom.
Yeah.
And making records, and I had my duvet hung over a closet door and a pillow, and that was like my vocal booth, and like now I got this room and it's like, holy shit, this all caught up to me quick. But like, look at this, like if that
that's
13,
all you
14 year
wanted back
old
then.
could have seen this, this is all I ever wanted.
Yeah.
Like, straight up 100%, this is all I ever wanted. You know, we would say to each other when we were young, like my cousin and I, because he's the one I first started making music with, and we're like, our goal was like, we're gonna get signed, like we're gonna be famous rappers. We're whatever that meant.
Yeah.
Getting signed. I still don't know what that even means, because there's a million ways to make a record deal nowadays. But but that was like the goal initially. But fuck, just having a really cool room like this to be creative in
is the dream.
Is the dream.
Yeah.
So,
and it was the dream, like, for that younger version of you. And sometimes, we don't appreciate how far we've come, because it's just so bred into human nature to be like, okay, I got to here. What's next?
100%. Yes.
And
on to the next thing. Like, I'm chasing something all the time.
Yeah.
Like,
and when you continue to chase, you're in that lack mentality. You're in that chasing mentality.
Right.
You forget that, like, wait, I have a home studio, like, which is like more than a lot of people can say. And this is like also what, young Chloe dreamed about. Like, oh, I just can't wait till I've got some speakers and I can wake up in the morning and sip my coffee and just mosey in and work on my song at any time of the day.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow, luxury. Right?
Like,
shit.
And just like express myself whenever I want. Like, that was all I wanted.
Yeah.
And then I got it, and then I was like, okay, how am I going to capitalize on this?
Mm-hmm.
And because that's just, I think it's also becoming an adult and realizing you have to, pay the bills, and you're like, okay, now I have to make this feel monetarily worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
And the younger you thought it was just worthwhile in order to be able to create whenever you wanted.
Yeah. No, that's a really key point there, is like becoming an adult, and that initial passion can't just be playtime.
No.
It's got to have there's got to be some sort of back end or other thing happening with it.
And that's the thing, is me pursuing careers outside of music. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this for people who are really pursuing music hardcore. If it's working for you, great. Like, I'm so happy for the people I know who are successful and are loving every minute of it. I love that. But for me, I needed something else to pay the bills so I could free myself up for playtime.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And because it didn't feel like creating it as a job didn't feel like playtime anymore. And I think that maybe it's a little bit of my whimsical daydreaming type of personality and my ADHD, and I need variety, and not having variety and it just being like, oh, all right, I'm going to do this project, I'm going to do that project, and just felt like the same. I didn't feel like mentally fulfilled by that any longer. And then I was confused because I was like, this is all I have. This is all I wanted.
Yeah.
And I'm not even like, what's happening here? And doing a job outside of music, and then also doing, music as well when I want on the projects I want to work on, makes it so when I sit at that desk, I'm like, whoa, like I can't wait to be here because I've just spent, 40 hours this week elsewhere. And the whole time I've been scheming in my head of like, oh, I could do this, I could do that. And yes, I might not be eating, sleeping, living, breathing music all of the time the way that my peers are who are really successful and enjoying that. But when I am living and breathing music, like I'm in it. And like I get home and I pick up that guitar and it feels like, yes, like I'm so excited to be playing my music right now, or working on my music, recording my music. And I guess my personality just needs almost absence to make my heart grow fonder over it. Like I kind of have to keep that desire alive.
Yeah.
And it's also in living my life pretty normally, like along with society of non-artists, and that fuels my writing in a way that is relatable. I think that the moment you're not the common person anymore, and you're just like an artist.
Wow, that's deep. But you've got to make music that's relatable at the end of the day, right?
Because not everybody is an artist.
Yeah.
Like,
and speaking in metaphors 100% of the time. And
like, so when I'm not doing music, I say, this is inspiration time. This is the fuel for the song I'm going to write that's really going to resonate with someone. When I was working at the bar and I wasn't like completely fulfilled in it, but I was making good money. I loved my regulars. I loved my coworkers. It was a fun job. I was creating the playlists every night. Yeah. And nobody, some of my regulars knew I was an artist, and my coworkers and stuff, but like nobody really knows that part about you. Yeah. And it's kind of nice just being known as just Chloe, like this person that I really like, and not having to tell everyone and project everyone that like I'm an artist, and having those personal relationships with people that had nothing to do with music at all, or like my identity as an artist, bred a lot of interesting conversations and interesting experiences. And writing a song about like, feeling like I'm wasting my nights at the bar. Yeah. There's tons of bartenders out there who they hear that line and they go, oh, fuck. Yeah, I felt that way. Me, man. And folk artists, I'm a folk artist like by nature, and that's who I love, like Gordon Lightfoot, James Taylor, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Carole King. Like I love those songs that feel rooted in everyday reality.
Right.
And if I get so far into my artistry that I'm not just Chloe anymore, I feel like you kind of lose that connection to that writing. And I used to think that I started songwriting because I was a singer and I wanted to like have an outlet to showcase my voice. But then I realized there's always been the writer inside of me, and like that's what I love doing is songwriting, and keeping that sense of humanity about me, and then just being an everyday person on top of doing music allows me to have that special ingredient with the artists I work with who are just pursuing it just out of artistry. Right. I feel like I bring something to the table lyrically, and that kind of grounds it again.
What came first for you? Like if we can go back to the beginning for a minute, was it writing poems in notebooks, or was it singing and like melodies?
For me, it was like I have this like innate memory of sitting in the minivan, and it was a rainy day, and Hey Jude came on, and I was like 6 years old. Like I'm not mature enough to like deeply resonate with that song, but I felt like I knew it. You know, I remember just looking out and being like, yeah, hey Jude,
cool.
like,
Yeah.
don't make it bad. Like, you know, and just being like, oh, like, I felt like it struck a chord with me at 6 years old. Yeah. and just realizing that, like, oh, like, music makes me feel something. It makes me feel something that I've never even lived long enough to experience. Like, and so I was always connecting to songs, like dancing and singing along to songs. That's where it started for me, was like, this makes me feel something. I love this. And then I was a journal girl, and I was writing in my journals and my diaries all of the time, and wrote poems. But I remember always having this air of like, oh, well, like, I'm not like that kind of artist. Like, I'm not a musician, or I'm not a poet. Like, I'm just Chloe. Like, I always kind of approach it like, oh, like, I don't know if I'm very good at this. Like, I just kind of did it out of curiosity, but I never thought anything of it. And then continuing to work on my singing, and me singing other people's songs and lyrics that resonated with me. I chose the songs I sung because I really liked them. And then seeing someone in the audience shed a tear and being like, yeah, I didn't write that, but I connected to it enough that that person's crying. Maybe I could write my own song that could make someone cry. Like, that's not the goal, but I think a bittersweet, beautiful moment is why people resonate with music and why they turn to music, is they want to feel.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And they want someone to express the thing that they're too afraid to say. And so I write a lot of songs where, ooh, like, that lyric hurts to sing, and it makes me uncomfortable knowing that the people in my life know that I wrote that.
Yeah.
Oh, is that how you really feel? And it's like, that's how I really felt in that moment. Mm-hmm. And I have to remind people about creative liberty too, is like, I don't feel that devastated all the time. I wrote that song in a devastating moment. Mm-hmm. And now I'm just continuing to sing it so that when someone else is in a devastating moment, they feel heard and seen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they don't have to outwardly express it or be brave themselves. They can just listen to the song. It's hard being an artist and being brave enough to say exactly how you feel in a moment, because you feel like that lyric might stay with you in an outward perspective way.
So when you were singing covers, did you have your own studio set up at that time as well, or did you decide to just go out and sing songs, or were you did you decide to record yourself singing songs at home as well?
I was in this like little singing vocal group. Like we did Disney songs in malls, like as a kid, and then I expanded to doing like solo vocal lessons. And my vocal coach had this like little studio rig, but it was like he had literally like ripped the vocals out of songs, like utilizing EQ, and then we just like sang on top of the backing track. And like these were the recordings that I had. It was like very makeshift. And then it got to a point where I was a teenager, so I was probably like 14, and went back to this vocal coach, and he's like, I've got a connection to a producer. And I had started writing little songs on the guitar. And he said, you know, I don't have the setup, like now that you're not doing the little dinky covers, I don't have the setup for you to like bring in your guitar and record it. So I'm going to connect you with this guy. And so I wrote this song called So Gone, and it's so cringe, but I was so proud of it at the time. Yeah. And we recorded it, and it's a good recording. I think it's still on YouTube. To this day, I still listen back and I'm like, that's cute. Yeah. But like, it's still pretty catchy. And put it on YouTube, and then everybody in my high school was like, I love this song.
Nice.
Like, you're going to be famous.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the journey began, was like, oh, everybody believes in me. I better pursue
Maybe
this.
I should try this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I started playing mic nights, and I would write a song every week so I could showcase it at the mic night. I would play a new song
Was this at your school, a mic night, or was this at a local?
It was Gallagher's Cafe in Port Moody. And it was the closest one to Maple Ridge that was on a weekly basis that had a pretty good turnout.
Okay.
New musicians every week. And
right on.
I saw it as like, I'm networking, and I'm like,
sure you were.
This is my beginning. And Mark, the host of it, really liked what I was doing too, and he was a singer-songwriter artist, and I remember being inspired in that space, and other people just coming out to play a song they had just written, and I was like, oh, this is kind of fun, this is cool. And then there was like but are you going to record the songs? And I was like,
yeah,
I
right.
never
That's
even
the next
thought
step.
of that.
Yep.
And so then I kept writing the songs and making YouTube videos, and being in my bedroom. Hi, I'm Chloe, and this is a song. I just finished writing it.
And that's you just talking into the mic into your laptop then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the acoustic with the room ambience just on YouTube. Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
they're terrible. And like there's like, I hadn't even really fully found my guitar skills or my voice even yet. So like I listen back to them and I'm like, oh, but like you got to start somewhere.
Have to. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then it became like I just never stopped. Like it just never stopped. I just kept writing, kept playing. I was obsessed. I was in my bedroom all the time. And to the point where my dad was like, what are you going to do with this? And I was like, oh, I hadn't got to that point yet. I hadn't
just
thought
knew that
about
you liked doing it. Yeah.
And so then I went to Nimbus. And that was kind of like, because I was afraid also of being bulldozed in studio settings, and I wanted to be able to make my own demos because it's such a cost, right? Like if I could get myself to the demo phase on a personal level, then I could see what songs are worth investing in to go into the studio and continue to record. And I wanted to understand that, like, when I went to Nimbus, the whole point of it was just as an artist, I could understand that world. And then I ended up pursuing artistry and not really even considering myself much of a engineer or producer, because I kind of just saw school as like, I'm going to learn this so I know. And so it can support my artistry.
But you were in AMP. Was that the course you were in, advanced music production?
Yeah.
But not going into it with the idea, like you said, of really pursuing engineering or a producer. Yeah. You just were like, okay, I need to take my music kind of to the next phase, right?
And I just knew that I wanted to be, as a songwriter, a part of the recording process in an involved way. I wanted to understand the language, and I wanted to understand how to connect with the producers and the engineers that I was working with. And for me, it was strictly strategic in being like, I want my records to be my records, like to be a reflection of me. I don't want it to be me bringing a song to somebody and then it becoming my song put through the filter of their sound.
Right. Okay.
And then I pursued artistry mostly, and I worked with other producers out of school because I still didn't really have the belief that I was much of an engineer or producer. And then I kind of was like, well, it'd be good for me to have a studio so I could just keep being a songwriter and writing songs and demoing everything I'm doing. So I set up my home rig, and then I started really gelling with my demos and being like, I like this process.
Right.
This is fun.
Yeah.
And then just putting it out there to people I was collaborating with on an artist level. Like my first project in my home studio, Stephanie Sparrow, she and I were doing this thing called Vancouver sessions, where we were just doing Canadian covers in different locations around Vancouver live, and we collaborated really well together on these covers. And she's like, I really like the sounds that you're putting out. Do you want to do my EP? And I hadn't even considered it. Like, I was just like, wait, you want me to produce you? Huh?
Yeah.
And then I was like, yeah, absolutely. I can do that. And I took out a small loan. I built up my gear and I built up the home studio. And I'm like, this is my first project. Like, we're doing this. And we made this EP. It was such a fun process. And we did it slow burn, like when we had time on our weekends. So like we started in, spring of the year that I can't even remember the year now, but we started in the spring and she was releasing it by next spring. Like it was a year. Yeah.
For how many songs?
For 6 songs.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because our process was not normal. It wasn't like we're going in for a week, we're doing it all.
Yeah.
Like
with long hours.
No.
And yeah.
It was like I would bounce down the version that we had from that day and we'd listen to it for 2 weeks. And then we would come back and be like, let's do this.
Okay. Yeah.
And the fact that I loved that style of the process so much was also the glaring red flag that like, oh, this isn't going to be a payday career for me if I'm doing it this casually.
Yes.
Like,
I see what you're saying now. Yeah.
And I like doing it this way. Like I do really love the magic you can have going into the studio and doing it from top to bottom. I did that with my project. I brought the demos to a point. I got some great session players and we just made it happen in 2 days for 9 songs. And I'm going to do some overdubs and some vocals in my home studio and do a preliminary mix. But I'm not going to trust myself with the final mix because I feel like as an artist, there's the parts that you love so much that you can't, make the forest from the trees almost. You're kind of locked into like, I really love this part about it. But it doesn't actually serve the mix.
I feel you. Yeah. Or elements of, I don't know. I still don't like the sound of my voice when I hear myself rapping. There's like frequencies that bug me and that's all I can focus on.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wish I could just hand that off to someone else to just finish it for me even. Yeah. I feel you on that.
Well, also, yeah, I'll get into like, do I sound shrill there? like you get tired of the sound and they're like, no, it sounds powerful. I'm like, okay, so maybe you should be working on this. Like I'm just looking at myself very critically now. And I think it's also when you're in that stage of the game, your mind is looking for something wrong with it almost.
Definitely, yeah.
Because you're like, it's almost done.
And you're trying to be a perfectionist or you're trying to be like, for sure. And if you're the only one with ears on it, that's even tougher. I mean, all the big albums that we stream and look up to, go check the credits out on Wikipedia.
So many.
There's an army of people, right? But if it's just you in your home studio and there's like, you're like, I just recently started like sending stuff from my new album to friends and engineers who I respect just to like get a fresh take on it or something that I hadn't considered, and I'm getting great feedback of like, oh yeah, like that is a little bit too much reverb, like I don't need that much reverb on that. So it's just things like that.
But like that's also the nature of like how I'm doing it is like I sometimes feel like I'm not getting enough practice at it because I'm doing it project by project and not all the time. So I've been, for fun, just mixing random projects from school, and
cool.
things like that. And just being like, because I don't want my practice hours to be on the thing that
you're being paid for or that you're working
or the being paid for that I'm like, that is like going to be my final project.
Oh yeah.
And so sometimes you just got to pull yourself out of those songs and work on something for the fun of it, for the hell of it, and get in that mindset of mixing and trying new things. Because it can get really frustrating when you're trying new things on a song that you want desperately to be done.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I find, for me at least, like a lot of the breakthroughs I've had as an engineer or in mixing have been not on something that I'm contracted to be working on, but like you said, going through old unreleased stuff and just trying out compressors or just tweaking things. Oh, this plugin that I've never touched, let me try this, and you figure something out, and then you have a new skill in your tool kit to try for another song. So yeah, I do a lot of that, just playing around in between projects to learn.
There's also just the irony to that. You're like, damn, this sounds good, and then you like try to get that magic into something that you want to sound good, and you're like hitting a wall. You're like, why is this not sounding right?
Yeah.
Like, the mixing process is so frustrating sometimes because it sounded great going in and I felt really good about it, and now I'm listening to it, but I feel like it's not quite where I want it to be. But you're like trying the things that you think are gonna like pan it out and make it sound right, but you're like, no, this doesn't quite doesn't feel right. And when it's in the context of a project where somebody else is paying you to do it, that's even more frustrating because you're like, I want for them, I want this to sound really stellar.
Of course.
For myself, I want it to sound really stellar. But now I'm on the 6th hour of doing this today and it's not sounding how I want it to sound. I need to take a break, an ear break. I need to walk away.
Yeah.
Because also, like, monetarily, you don't want to go over budget with your time. Like, I'm not going to, like, if I say I'm going to accomplish the mix in this set time, I'm not going back to the artist and being like, hey, I didn't quite get it right yet, pay me more. Like,
no, I've never done that as well. Like,
Yeah.
I have a rate for mixing, and if the song takes me 3 hours or if it takes me 3 weeks, it's the same price.
Yes.
And I just want to get it to where I feel amazing about it,
Yes.
regardless.
Yes. But like when you're on that, you know, when you look at the clock and you're like, oh my God, I'm still at this. I'm still not loving it.
Yeah, I've been there.
It's
How am I still working on this EQ or whatever, this snare sound? God.
And then you feel like maybe I'm being too precious about it. So you walk away and you come back to it and you're like, no, I still don't like it. Like, because sometimes it is just that you've been going at it too long. And,
Definitely.
And it's actually just fine where it is. But
sometimes working on it too long too, you're unmixing it, or like you may be making it worse. So those breaks are so important. I can't tell you how many times I'm lucky that I don't work with anyone who is signed or who's got like labels giving them pressure to put deadlines, and all the artists I work with are independent, and you know we give ourselves like professional like deadlines and things to work within, but I'm so fortunate that I don't have like fucking this, we gotta have this out tonight. So I get a little bit more time to experiment and things like that, which is so nice.
Well, and the nature of my projects is like, because I'm not doing it for the innate payday or like pumping them out so I can bring somebody else in, is I just say like, I have a full-time gig outside of this, and like, if you want to work with me, it's like we can set a timeline that you're happy with, but like there will be times where I'm just physically not able to work on it because I'm working elsewhere, and it has to fall in on my weekends. And if I'm completely burnt out on my weekend, I might not be able to put as many hours into it as either of us would like. And there are limitations to that world. And that's why I don't take it personally when someone doesn't want to work with me because of that timeline issue, you know? Or if someone's like, yeah, I'm really motivated to get this done like right here, right now, I'll just say, I'm not the producer for you. I can't, like, I physically can't accomplish that without like burning out hard. So there are definitely a lot of detriments to working outside of working in music. I think that it can be the limitation that stops you from getting more projects too, because you're just not available the same as producers who are doing it nonstop.
Yeah. You work full time then outside of music?
Yes. Yeah.
That's a lot. I used to do that. It was
Yeah.
a lot. And that was when I was like peak SoundCloud rappers at 2-Track as well, like 15, 16-hour days. Like it was a lot.
So I'm so the job that I'm doing is seasonal right now. So I go out, like it starts in mid-April, ends in October. And then in the off season, I just work like very sparingly part-time because I'm making enough in the on season to have some savings and security for myself. And so that's my fun time. Between October and March is when I'm making music, doing projects. And it kind of aligns because like artists are touring and playing gigs all spring and summer long. They're busy. That's their busiest time to like have feet on the ground and be getting seen. The winter is usually when people are hyped up in the studio. So that's what I've just kind of said. Like I'm a seasonal producer. Cool. I'm a seasonal producer, but I'm still doing stuff on the weekends right now because I want to get the artists that I'm working with. I want them their projects to be completed. But I'm not taking on too much because it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I'm sure you've experienced burnout. I talked about it last episode or the one before, but I know that I don't want that again, and it's not worth it. To feel physically ill and completely run down to the point where you're seeing your doctor and seeing if you have like a virus or a disease, but you're actually just
exhausted.
You're just exhausted. Like all your tests came back negative, but you're fine. Like you're just fucking burning yourself out, man. Like, so, well, that's really cool. I'm so proud of you for doing that. I resonate with your philosophy and your attitude like so much because I feel the same way. Like, and that's really, really cool for you you're doing it for you, for the right reasons and for the love of the music. So, and
like, that's what I have to keep reminding myself is that like, I'm proud of my mentality behind it because like, I'm not giving up. Like for a long time, I thought my mentality around it and working outside of it was kind of like super uninspiring and super like give up mentality and like, and no, I've just realized that like at the end of the day, I'm a human and I'm living my life and I want to be happy. And if this style of doing it is what's making me happiest, then that's not uninspiring. That is inspiring. And I think it's important for other people who are unhappy with the way that they're going about their artistry or their career to know that it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to pivot. You're not a quitter. If you're still doing the thing that you love because it brings you joy, you're just doing it a little differently. You're not doing it all the time the way that the success stories tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's okay.
Yeah, we are very complex creatures, and we're all vulnerable. Like, be vulnerable for God's sakes. Like, let yourself feel a certain way and like make space for what's important to you.
Yes.
Like for me, like at the bottom of my pyramid is just like my like comforts.
Yes.
And my time for me, like above everything, honestly. And that's what lets me be Max.
Yeah.
That's what lets me have my energy, my spiritual energy, my clear head to do everything else. And I'm at the point in my life now. It's taken me a long time to realize that, but I've got my formula now, and that's okay. And I'm doing music less than I think I should, or that I thought I should when I was younger. And but I realized like I'm not made that way.
No,
I'm just my personality, me. I'm not built that way, and that's all right. And like you said, I'm not quitting. Far from it. Yeah. But I'm finding this where all the pieces fit and the space for each thing that so I can do it all.
And if you don't make space for you to be Max, you're not showing up to those projects authentically.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the magic ingredient, is like being able to show up authentically. So for the people that they can keep showing up authentically as themselves and like keep going project after project, being a yes man, taking it in, seeing where this goes, man, like I'm envious of that quality. It's not built into my nature. And so when I was doing that, I wasn't showing up as myself.
Right.
I was showing up as a version of myself I thought I should be.
Yes. Yeah. Whatever that is, the ego, the expectation, what we've come to believe from social media or just seeing the successful people out there. But like find what makes you happy. And you know, like last year, I did this album.
Yeah.
Phantom of the Corner Store. With
I love that title.
With Manco Wilder. And I had a few other projects on the go here and there, like singles. Mm-hmm. But I was more than the engineer. Like I tracked all the vocals and mixed all of it, but I'm doing vocal production. We're like putting samples in. I'm like on that list in Wikipedia, like I would be like 5 or 6 of those people on that list, right?
Yeah.
Other than just mixed by Max Deshaw, right? And I had to remind myself, like, yeah, like these songs were raw. Like just there's nothing. I got drums, stems, a sample, and vocals, and we turned this into magic together.
And you did that. Yeah.
And like that took a year.
Oh yeah.
Like it was like not just, like I said, not just mixing, but like putting everything into this album. Like I feel like I made that album as well. I'm not the artists on the front, but like we made that together. Manco, Wilder, and I made that together. And I got to remind myself, like, it's a fucking lot of work.
Yeah.
So like I should like pump the brakes. Like we made an album last year.
Exactly. Also, like you intimately know every part of that album from the perspective that you literally fabricated it from nothing, and you created something.
There was nothing there. It was an empty Pro Tools session.
Yeah. Which is wild how that works. Like I have to remind myself too with my songs, like that didn't exist, you know, and now it does. That's pretty cool. Just that in itself is a success.
To create. Yeah. It really is really special. Yeah. I mean, people that don't make music, we take for granted that like we make songs.
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty cool thing. Not everybody can make a song.
And I feel fortunate when I'm working my other job as an onboard host, and those my co-hosts, they say, "Man, like it's so cool what you do. I could never do that." Like,
yes, I hear that
like
too.
From personal experience of like, I just couldn't even like think of that. I just couldn't even dream that out of anywhere. And I'm like, wait, that is cool. You sometimes forget that just the act of creating is an interesting thing. It's a fun, cool thing. And I get kind of bashful when people are like, "Oh, that's so cool," because I'm viewing it through the lens of like, well, I'm not as successful as other people, or like I'm not really like, you know, I get bashful. I'm like, they're gonna go to my Spotify and see that I only have like this many thousand listeners, and like maybe they'll perceive it as like, oh, I'm not very good because of that perception. And so I get bashful telling people about what I do, because I forget the flavor and the factor of like that I'm just even able to do that is cool. And that's where they're coming at me like from. It's like, that's really cool that you like write songs and you do that. Like I could never do that. And just because it's not like wildly successful, I'm like cowering and being like, yeah, but it's like,
they're all
it's
right.
like a passion, you know? Like, and I have to remind myself like, oh yeah, it is kind of fucking cool. Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of things that I suck at, you know, that I think that are really cool that other people can do. Like a friend of mine became a doctor recently.
I can never do that.
Like he's studying like cancer cells, and he's like a biochemist. And I'm just like, you got to be so good at math, bro, and like memorizing things. And he's like incredible. And I'm just like, that's fucking amazing. Like I can't do that to save my life.
Never.
You know,
Yeah.
and we got to remind ourselves, you know, we're making records here. We're writing feelings and
Yeah.
making and then putting it to sound, and that's pretty incredible.
Well, and kind of calling back to what I said earlier, we're allowing people to feel things that they're afraid to feel. And we're validating that feeling by it being in writing and being in a song and giving them that little chill up their spine and going, oh, I like that. Like, I listen to music like a weirdo. Like, if I fall into a song I love, I will literally listen to it on repeat for hours.
Oh, wow.
Like, it's also a little bit of my autism showing, a little bit, but like, it's a thing I do. Like,
Okay.
if I get into a song, I will like repeat listen, and it's cringe. I know it's weird, but something that makes me a little bit happy inside. I'm like, maybe one day there'll be somebody else who's a little weird out there who listens to my
repeats
song
one of your
on repeat.
songs. Yeah. Then maybe they already are.
Yeah. Who knows?
If they're connecting with it enough and then it's making them feel something. I think it's so cool too that what we're doing, the act of recording is making something that is infinitely consumable. Like, we're not just making I compare music to food a lot, especially with mixing. Like, we're like chefs.
Yeah.
But that
when
meal you eat once and it's gone. But
Yeah.
if you make a record, you can play that record
Like,
on repeat
on
and then
repeat.
continue enjoying
Yeah.
that meal.
So I'm really just like getting the value out of that song by listening to it as much as I am.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, I'm paying for Spotify. I'm going to listen to this song that makes me feel good too many times to count. And it's kind of a bad habit because then I'll like fall out of that song and be like, I just can't even listen to it ever again. But then I come back to it like 5 years later. I'm like, oh, that's why I really liked that song.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of listening to not one song, but an album that I've had on shuffle for a year. It's a 99 song album. It's a soundtrack for a video game, so there is like some variety in there. But I've basically only listened to that. Of course, I've listened to other things. When I come into the studio, I usually fire up Apple Music and I'll check out a couple of songs of new charts.
Yeah.
Just to stay fresh and current. But in my own enjoyment, my time,
Your free time.
I'm listening to Hitoshi Sakimoto, who's the composer, and it's the soundtrack for Final Fantasy 12, the reorchestrated version. So they took all the MIDI songs from the original game and reorchestrated it like with a full symphony.
Ooh.
And like oboes and percussion and real violins, and it's just like, woo. So I've had that on shuffle for a year.
Yeah. I've been listening to Andy Schaaf's discography for a year. Like all the songs through and through. It started with the album Neon Skyline, but the way his music resonates with me, it's like I'm inspired and calm at the same time.
Oh, cool.
I can have it on in the background, but I find myself singing along. Like, so I'm actively listening in a moment where you wouldn't be actively listening.
Yeah.
Like while I'm doing the dishes or cooking or just sitting at home writing in my journals. And it's been huge inspiration for me. But then, Eric, my partner, is like, you really like this Andy Schaaf guy, because like I'm literally only listening to him for weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And I have to remember that he has experience in our home too. I better switch it up a notch,
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll be like, okay, babe, like you play your playlist, like, because I enjoy all music, but I will get locked into like, this feels good right now, and keep listening to it. Yeah. And I think that that's kind of cool. Like, I mean, because I'm sure when Andy Schaaf started out, he wasn't thinking there's going to be this girl in Vancouver who listens to my discography for a year straight, like every day, gets up in the morning, presses play. Like, that's kind of cool. Like that. And he gave me that.
Yeah.
That's like, it's a gift that keeps on giving, music. Like the fact that I feel lighthearted and calm and happy when I listen to his music. and I can just keep doing that. Like he made it once and I can just keep listening to that. And and that's why I think also people become so connected to artists who make them feel certain ways. Like you can't quantify how much it gives to your life. Like really good music, like or music that you love.
Oh my gosh. What kind of art do you connect with? Like not music?
Not music, films.
Okay, yeah.
But it's also connected to soundtrack too. Like I love the way, like, but I love the storytelling to films. I always did as a kid. And I think that would be a career path I would have gotten into if I hadn't gone into music as heavily as I did.
Nice.
I don't know if I would have, I really like the idea of like creating the story and directing it. Not being an actor per se, but I love, I would say film is a form of art that I really appreciate when I'm not making music.
I always have films on, like on this.
Yeah.
This is the expensive display, but I don't use it to mix. It's just to have shit on in the background while I'm mixing, and this has always got something going.
Yeah.
Just as atmosphere, because I feel I like I don't like having empty walls. My house is full of art paintings. I don't like having empty things. So I have a visual stimulant kind of there in the background all the time, and there's always a film going on or somebody playing a game, and it's like there's another world there. And it's also a nice way for me to break my eyes off of Pro Tools and then still listen to what I'm working on, but look at something else as like a consumer as opposed to the engineer. Yeah. That shift in like visual shift is really valuable. I've found sometimes even just like turning your screen off or whatever. But anyhow, that's a thing that I do a lot. Big fan of films as well.
I think all forms of art are just like, I get completely baffled by painters, and like I could never do that. Like I could never just like think of something in my mind's eye and like paint it. Like I have so much respect for that form of art in a way that like, I have artwork on my walls and I'll sometimes just fall into like a trance staring at it for a long time. No thought really behind it, just like absorbing what it is. And but I feel like also the arts, it's funny, the arts almost like were never meant to become monetary, like become something that was for payment. But the evolution of society and the demand for income and supporting yourself financially made it so that artists had to pivot. If they were able to continue making art in the way that they make art, they had to get paid for it. Yeah. But but the nature of creating art, like, should never start at like how I'm going to make money off this, because that's not how art historically started. It started from like an exploration of being curious and wanting to make something. Yeah. And wanting it to be appreciated. And it's hard being in this world and this society and having the demands that there are and being an artist, because you feel that pressure to make something for you monetarily. But yeah, that's why I had to find something outside. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's tough, and every artist ever started out like doing it as a passion, doing it for fun, buying their own equipment. Like then you've got to find ways to make that money back somehow, right? So ultimately you have to have, that has to be part of it.
Yeah. But how it started was just someone being like, this really gave something to me. Thank you so much. And they energetically gave money in exchange because they were like saying thank you. Right. But like it kind of went away from that. People feeling like this gives so much to me, so I'm going to give back to you as an artist. And it kind of became this realm of like, I'm a consumer and I'm going to pay to continue to consume. And then it creates this like factory.
Yeah.
Where people are like, oh, people are willing to pay for this.
Let's just churn out
and
as
then
much
the big wigs
as
come
we
in
can
and,
to capitalize on that. And there's a whole industry that just is that.
Yeah.
That's just songs to be consumed because there's profit to be made.
I mean, a lot of the radio is that, radio hits and songs, and it is cool, like what songwriters do when they get in a writer's room, being like, all right, like let's write a hit today.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that artistry and that creativity is cool, that people are able to do that.
Yep.
Like I've been in rooms where working with other people, being like, how can we make this like more hooky?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how can we make this more fun? But I don't know, like it would be fun to write songs every day for a living and be like a commissioned songwriter. But I always like wonder if it's like weird for those songwriters who like started in a place of like expressing themselves and expressing their soul, and now they're like getting paid every day to express something that they think is going to be popular. I wonder if that's a weird place to be in, because like clearly they're talented at it and they're doing it and they're making a living from it. It's probably really fun, and every day is a thought experiment, you know. That's really stimulating. But I wonder if they look at their discography and the songs they've written and they're like, am I proud of that?
Yeah.
You know, like on a personal level.
It's a really interesting point. I don't know if I could handle that myself. Like if there was a point where there was like a lot of money to be made, or that I was gaining and I was still having to find a way to be true to what I was doing, knowing that money and all these people were counting on me. And I don't know. I've never even gotten close to that, so I don't know. That's what I thought I used to want. Yeah. Anyhow, but
no, it's true. It's like what everybody really wants is to be the exception to the rule, and to be that person that authentically shows up as themselves, and then people keep paying them to just do that.
Right.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
Like, but it's not even 1% of the population of artists that get to be that.
When you're working with the artists, you know, on your roster, are you helping write lyrics as well? Are you songwriting with them, or are you? Yeah.
I mean, not all of them. Like Stephanie Sparrow came with her songs completed, and we like expanded upon them. And then Darren, this project that I'm working with, expanded upon it. But then there's artists like Isabeau. Like we wrote the song together from beginning to end. It started with just a verse and continued. And this girl, Delaney, she had written a song, but parts of it, and we like kind of edited it and like changed some of the lyrics and maybe changed a little bit of the like structure. But I don't like, I know that there's producers that go into those moments being like, I want to co-write it because I want points in the copyright, where it works. That's not my mentality going into it. I'm just kind of like, let's make the best song we possibly can. I'm going to bring ideas forward, and if you're comfortable with it ending up being a co-write or a collaboration, great. But if you want it to be your melody and your lyrics at the end of the day, absolutely. Like, I won't push you on that. So, because I just want it to be the best song at the end of the day. And so I'll bring my ideas and just say, yeah, this is what I think lyrically you could go with that. Like, what do you feel about that?
Right. Awesome. Tell me a little bit more about your setup at home. Like, what kind of mic are you rocking as your main vocal mic?
I've got, because I do kind of more folk bass, so I've got the Ear Trumpet Labs Edwina, which can do vocals, but also guitar and vocals for more of a live kind of demo version.
Oh, I never heard of that one.
And I've got a Audio Technica 4050, and I've got a Shure, and honestly, I'm rocking a pretty lax mic list, because with those three, I can kind of usually get the tone that I need for the projects I'm doing. I would love to invest in more microphones as I go, but what I started doing with my music specifically when it started taking it kind of more on in a chill scale is like the music I make from the money I make from the music is my budget to put back into the music.
Right on. Yeah.
And then everything I make on my other gig is for life and security and future. So when I, bring in a new project, I'm like, great, I'm going to buy some more plugins and then maybe a microphone. And so it's kind of fun when the project becomes more so fun money than it is about, security. I'm rocking a really simple setup, just Pro Tools, got a huge array of plugins and sampled sounds, full scale weighted keyboard. I've got my Acoustasonic guitar, my Gibson J45 acoustic. I've got a Strat, a bass, and so a few amps. And I just kind of like make what I can. Yeah. And then also if it's missing an ingredient or a level of performability, a player that has a little more skill than me, I will contract out work too and find other artists or players who have home studios who can play the guitar line and send that stem to me, and then I just mix it in and add on top of it. Yeah. I would say the scale of what I'm doing is not like big records with huge sound. I'm doing artists expression of kind of where they at and exploring and finding their sound. And I just want, at the end of the day, the most important thing to me is for them to feel like their song feels like them. Mm-hmm. And if we can do that within the scope of what I have at my exposure and what I have in my repertoire, great. If I talk to an artist that wants to work with me and I feel like I can't deliver that, I will say I don't think I'm the right fit for it, or come back to me if you have a budget where we can rent the studio and get the players and do it that way. And that's a tough thing to say, because obviously I want the gig. Obviously I want to do it.
Yeah, but you don't want to run into a really uncomfortable scenario where
they're just unhappy
midway through the project because you hadn't laid everything out on the table and been upfront with them, and then they have unreal expectations and things can get messy. So having that initial meeting and just being like, this is what I have, this is what I'm prepared to do. Yeah, that's you got to do that. You got to do the business part right at the beginning. Well,
and I can do acoustic sounds through guitar and through these, the bongos and the stuff that I have in the studio and the tambos and stuff. But I don't have a full kit set up. I don't have a live room for that. If that's what you want, we got to rent the studio and get the drummer and we can absolutely do that. But are you budget wise prepared to do that? So that's tough because there's always the talk of money is the tough one with artists. I'd love to just make songs if I was financially able to and just be a part of projects for the sake of it, but it's still an energetic exchange at the end of the day. You need to get paid for the work you're putting in, and I always just say the sample, the nature of what I do is I can do this much acoustically and then the rest of it's sampled instrumentation. And if you're okay with the way that sounds and that's okay with the vibe of what you're doing as an artist, great. If not, we'll pivot and see. Or you can work with someone else who has their studio built in, and I'll refer people to people that I know too. But yeah, when I've said, I had an experience where I said to an artist who really wanted to work with me, I don't know if I'm the person for the job. That was really tough because like I loved her artistry. I loved her songs. I could hear exactly how I wanted to produce them. But I did not have the equipment and the time at my the time to really see it through the way that I knew that it needed to.
What it deserved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, good for you. That's difficult.
And she took it. I don't think she took it very well. I think she kind of thought I was rejecting her. And I still feel weird about it to this day. I feel bad.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a rejection at all. I just saw so much potential in what she was doing, and it was really fucking good. And I wanted her to get that.
Yeah.
And maybe I could have pushed harder and been like, hey, like if we get this studio and we do this and if you expand the budget just a little more, like we can work together. But at that time I had just started doing it. I had just pivoted from being an artist to being a producer. And I honestly I didn't have faith in myself. I almost didn't believe that I could do it. And I listened back to the project she ended up doing, and it's great, and I'm really happy for her. I'm like, yes, okay, she ended up getting what she needed out of that. But I also hear it and I go, oh,
what you would have done to it.
I could have done
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's really brave of you, honestly. We're not talking about like a song, like for a whole project, but you know, putting the artistry first, putting the art first. It's incredible. Good for you. When it comes to drums, I talked about this quite a bit with when the Renaissance was here, but how are you getting samples? Are you programming drums? A lot of the stuff I heard that you worked on is pretty like folky, you know, like not heavy on the drums by any means, but how are you going about getting those sounds?
I'm programming the drums through Superior Drummer. Like,
oh, cool.
Yeah. And I'm using, and then I'm sometimes adding in my own samples that I have like in the pre-programmed format of what it is and changing things in and out. And like, I know that people kind of scoff at Superior Drummer. They're like, oh, that's like a home producer's like, or like an amateur's producer's drum program. But they sound good and the artists are happy with them.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Like 99.9% of people that don't make music aren't going to care or think that, oh, that sounds like a drum program and doing that. Like,
but also like the way in which the music industry now is like, there's a lot of just like drum machine and programmed drums.
Yeah.
And like, if the artist is cool with like an acoustic electric kind of fusion feel to what they're doing and that is their sound, then I don't see anything wrong with it. But if they come in and they're like, I really want it to feel like authentic folk, I'll be like, okay, maybe we should get real drums on this because like that's the way it's going to feel open and spacey. But yeah, then that's also the time where the budget comes into question and it's kind of like, well, what did you expect? Really exactly that? Like I could make magic and like make sampled drums feel like real drums. Like you can get close.
Yeah.
But it's not the same as having a real human playing behind it. It's
with the ambience of an actual room and
well, and also just kind of the cadence in which a human's playing and something programmed. Like I've kind of moved things slightly ahead and slightly behind at points in programmed drums to feel a little more real.
Yep.
But that's like kind of the extent of what you can do to kind of like make it feel a little more natural. But it's still the same snare sound throughout the whole, like this same cadence.
Same velocity.
Yeah. You're like, okay, I'm going to change a little. Like you can in Spirit Drummer change the velocity here and there and you can make it like kind of go on a bit of an algorithm of like variety.
It's called, in Logic, it's called humanize.
Yes, humanize. Yes.
And you can do like certain degrees of that.
It's so funny. Does it scare you, the idea that AI will be able to make music better than us?
Not better, but like I've had this conversation a couple of times recently, and no, I'm not scared of it. They might be able to make songs, but they're not going to be able to like replace the engineer's job or the mixer's job, because that's like taste at the end of the day.
And I always question, like, will it all end up sounding the same? Because like an AI is coming to a point of like what is like popular, or like what's it's getting inputted. Is it going to just become a blend of everything and then it all be kind of the same? It's curious to know how the parameters of that work. But the way that technology is advancing also makes me afraid for the state of producing as a viable career path. Because if like a singer-songwriter, like DIY artists, who are usually the kind of people that I work with, can do it cheaper with just a computer at home, and they're happy enough, like it's good enough.
That has crossed my mind.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. I think that what I've learned in all my years doing this is like there's definitely steps that cannot be skipped. And one of them is, the recording stage.
Yeah. No.
Having a great room and good microphone
that is
with
so
good
true.
technique and a nice preamp.
Yeah.
And a lot of artists at home, people that send me stuff to mix, don't have that. And that's why we've got places like Palm Street. We've got places like here. We've got, engineers like yourself that, oh yeah, come to my home studio. I've got some nice mics here.
Yeah.
Let's like get these fundamentals sorted right from the beginning. So until like, I don't know, all the independent artists own like a Manly or a U87 themselves and know how to set it up and gain stage and all that shit, right? I'm not worried about losing that job.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the production and not just with music now, but I don't know if you've seen some of the new like websites where you can just type words in and it'll make artwork for you.
Yeah.
And it looks really good.
It looks
it's
really
just like,
good.
Fuck, dude.
It's an interesting world that we're like moving into. I think that with the advancement of that, there's going to be a renaissance era of people who want human.
Yeah, there's going to be like people are going to be starving for realness again at some point. They're
just going to be like, this is so to the grid, it hurts my brain. Yeah.
It's just the screensaver. No, for sure. I mean, and it's going to get, I don't know, I'm just predicting here, but you can still see, when I see those images, there's like I don't know.
There's something about missing.
There's something missing, and there's something about the human imperfection, like the feeling, the care, the taste that goes into a mix, that goes into adding automation into a song. That I don't know, until we have like plugins or AI where you can type in like a feeling for that record, and they understand what that means, and they understand like, okay, this is the balance between the drum and the vocal, and like how to get that vibe right. I don't think that I'm going anywhere. If
AI develops like true emotional intelligence,
well, then we're fucked. Yeah. Like that's the end. If that, because that's what this is. Like we've been saying this all day, is like, this is about feeling.
Yeah.
We're putting feelings, we're capturing what feelings sound like when we're making music.
And they're literally the soundtracks of our lives. Like as music creators, like everything we make is like our life, like encapsulated in songs. It's kind of crazy. I listen back to old songs that I did when I was young, and like it's not perfect, but I'm like, that's me. Like I'm proud of that. Yeah. I've got
old albums. I don't know where they are anymore, but once in a while, hear things that I did long time ago, and like, yeah, there's a lot of personality in that, even if it was super raw and like I hadn't figured out my delivery yet and my voice wasn't there or whatever, but it's just like, that sounds like a person really enjoying themselves.
Or also just like, you're like, wait, that was a really creative thing I did there. Like, that's really cool. Like, you almost discredit, because it's like a younger version of you. You forget that you're like, whoa, wait, I was like pretty freaking creative. Like, that's a cool thing that I did. When did I stop doing that? Sometimes I listen to certain things I wrote and I go, oh, like, that's better than the song I wrote yesterday.
Oh yeah.
I definitely think my songwriting has gotten a lot more polished and expanded and to, you know, less simplistic. But sometimes simple songs are just great too.
Oh yeah.
I have to remind myself sometimes to not overcomplicate it.
I'm a little ashamed to say this, but I just listened to one of Bob Dylan's famous albums like a month ago. I'd never gone down that road of exploring him and giving him the credit that he deserves, but I listened to Blood on the Tracks, and like, that album blew my fucking mind. Like, I'm not into that style of music. I never have been, but man, was I ever able to appreciate what he was doing and how simple it was. Yeah. Oh my God, just vocal, guitar, maybe a bit of tambourine here and there, but it's acoustic shit, man, and it's so good.
And it also is so humbling as an engineer and producer to realize, like, at the end of the day, the most important thing is the source. Like, the artist that it's coming from, or the person who's playing it, or like, or even yourself, like the source of you as a producer behind the thing that you're programming. Like, it can make or break it. Like, the feel is like what you're putting into it. And I have to remind myself when I get hung up on nitty gritty technical things, and I'm like, oh, and scratching my head, I have to be like, well, is the performer behind it any good?
Right.
Yeah. Like,
or
like, you can't change a lyric once it's recorded.
You can't EQ feeling and change lyrics after. Yep.
And the performance is always king, and that's also why vocal days are so pressureful, because you're like, I wanted this to feel the way that I felt the day I wrote it. But the way that the process of recording and finally getting the budget and all these things worked, like, that song can be years old. Like, you cannot feel the way that you felt when you wrote it, and you have to get back to that place and perform it with passion.
Yeah, I've been going through that with my current solo project, because a lot of that stuff was when I was, you know, like, I'm a little over a year and a half sober now, and back when I wrote those songs, I was a mental case, you know, and I was drinking all the time, and my life was just girls and cigarettes and drinking and, you know, being a 20-year-old man or 20-year-old child, more like it.
Exactly.
And but like, and just full of ego, and I still find those songs valuable, so I'm trying to, like, some of them re-record, but like, I'm 34 now, like, I'm married, I'm like I said, I'm sober, I've got a secure life, and I'm a different person now, and it's like, do I have what it takes to get that flow again, to get that feeling again, and
or that mania,
but I've almost had to play a character in a sense.
But that's kind of fun. Like, putting on that hat again. It
is, and it's been really cool. It's been really cool. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of, I don't know, at least in rap, like, and hip hop and stuff, like, everybody's putting on a character.
Oh, yeah.
Like, those people aren't out there killing people.
No.
They're not out, like, they're actors.
Yeah.
But they're not on camera.
Yeah.
They're telling it through the microphone.
Well, and,
you know?
Like, I can relate this to, like, one of the biggest artists in the world, Taylor Swift. She writes songs about her life, yes, but she took many creative liberties. But she has this following. Like, I consider myself like a Taylor Swift fan. I listen to her music a lot, but like I'm not full scale Swiftie. Like,
okay.
you know, because
Yeah.
like I see the way that it's like they're hanging off every word and like then looking into like how it fits in the context of her life and like what it means. And like she does put Easter eggs in her stuff and like
Yeah.
creates cryptic messaging, but like also she's just a songwriter taking creative liberty. When she writes a lyric that feels earth shattering to you, like I find it kind of bizarre that the fans are like, is that about Joe Alwyn or is that about like this or like what does that even mean? And I'm like, she could also just write a song about the feeling of being in a relationship. It doesn't have to pertain to a specific moment in her life. She writes songs about her life, but not every lyric is like historically accurate.
Of course.
Like, and I just find it so bizarre, like that mentality of that some people truly believe that is her, like that her stage performer, her is just truly her. And I think that there's definitely authenticity to it and that is her, but she's performing, she's being putting on a performance. Like that's, I'm sure that when she gets home at the end of the day, like she's not, you know, like that grandiose version of her. And I find it kind of just crazy. And like that's also why I get afraid about putting out songs as vulnerable as I do, because I'm like, oh, are people gonna realize that like when I wrote that song, like wrote the lyric, I'll deny to the day I die that you ever crossed my mind. That's a pretty intense lyric to say. If people hold me accountable to that's how I feel all the time, like that's extreme. Like I'm dramatizing it for effect.
We're as artists, we're entertainers as well. People got to remember that. Like, yes, this is coming from a place of maybe personal experience and about our lives, and we're revealing things about our, you know, think of Eminem and like how candid he is about his life and his marriage and things like that, and like fuck yeah, people relate to that. But there's also a lot of, like you said, creative liberties in there that are for entertainment value as well, and we've got to remember that.
Well, we also have to remember that sometimes you make it more open and less specific so that it can resonate with more people.
Great point.
And then they're like, oh, so that specifically happened to you? And you're like, no, something similar happened. And then I expanded upon it and I found a way of making it not just my story, but anybody's story. Like I'll write a song about a fight that I had with my partner, and it starts specific and then it kind of bleeds into like, oh, but like what if this was part of the fight, or what if like this was like somebody else's? And like the more you kind of go away from the specifics of like what inspired it, you kind of venge further away from that specific nature of it. And it becomes more broad and more like a fight anybody could have in their relationship. But then somebody hears that song and they go, you guys good? Right? And you're like, we weren't that day. But we're fine now. Like, and
that's so funny.
And it's scary putting yourself out there like that and being as honest as I tend to be with my lyrics. But I'm like, if I'm not being honest, like, what's the point? Like, but then there's artists who like, in order to enjoy their art, they don't want the honesty. Like they want it to be something fabricated as a part of their character, because that allows them the creative liberty to just sing about anything and feel free to do so, and not have that, you know, potential repercussions of that. Like writing about something and being like, this is just kind of like a song that started on this and then became a thought, like a creative experiment and a thought process, and then it became about this, and then I realized that the original lyric I had didn't sound as good as this lyric that pulls it even further away from the truth. And then people hear that song and they hear that specific lyric that's the most untruthful lyric in the song. And they're like, wow, Chloe, like, I didn't know that you felt that way.
Yeah.
I'm like, actually, that's the one lyric that I like didn't feel that way, but I felt for like dramatic effect, it was nice to add, or it just sounded better phonically.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you actually get that feedback quite a bit from people where they're like checking in on you to make sure that?
Well, it's funny because like a lot of the songs that I have aren't recorded, and so it's friends and family hearing it first, or they're hearing me play it live in a room.
Okay.
And they're just like, "Ooh, that's a heartbreaking song," like, and you can kind of see them like the flicker, like they don't say it outright, but they're kind of like, "That's a really good song," but like, woof, like you've hit some sad times in your life, and like I'd be lying if I said no, I hadn't. Like when nothing is right and everything feels wrong and I feel mentally out of control, I sometimes write the best freaking songs.
Sure.
And so I just have to remind myself that when I'm sharing that song and that vulnerability of that moment, that I'm sharing a glimpse into a time in my life, but the way that time works is like you don't carry that memory forever.
It doesn't define you.
No. I think that you can get strung up on it defining you, because there are artists like Taylor Swift who allow her songs to like literally define her to her audience.
She's been that like heartbroken, innocent girl for 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, that's struggling with relationships. Yeah. It's like, but that's her character.
In the
like,
last couple of years, she started writing some spicy songs about like infidelity and things like that. And it's like, oh, that's an interesting, like an interesting thing. And, you know, it's kind of funny how like people are just like, yeah, like that's Taylor Swift's life. Like she meets a lover, they have a love affair, and then on to the next. And who is she with today? And it kind of makes me sad for her, because I feel like it takes away from how catchy and good the songs are. Like the fact that like people are like pulling them apart to be like looking into her personal life. That would be kind of scary having no anonymity and like people making all these assumptions based on your songs.
Yeah, again, like I don't know, I thought I wanted that, but I don't know if I'd be able to handle it if that was my life, to be honest with you, you know.
I would get so frustrated.
Like
I'd be like, I just wrote a song.
Yeah.
Like, stop reading into it.
Yeah, stop picking it apart.
And also, like, her sense of grandioseness and, like, what she is in the industry is, like, she's almost become bigger than herself. Like, she's, like, her... It must be hard, like, going home at the end of the day and just being yourself, but knowing that the whole world perceives you as this thing that's so much bigger than you.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. The fame.
Yeah.
The fame. Like, people want to be famous. I don't think you do.
Or also people feeling like they know you.
Yeah.
That's weird to me.
Yeah.
Like, people were like, oh, Taylor, like, your songs got me through my whole life. Like, I feel like we're best friends. Like, ooh.
Yeah, I'm just showing you, like, a painting.
A snapshot.
A snapshot of what's going on here. Like, yeah, don't get too attached to that. It's weird, but that's what music is for so many people.
Yeah.
It is like an escape, is a way to get through difficult times, is like entertainment, and it's like there for them when nothing else is.
Yeah.
So I can understand how they could do that for sure.
Well, and that's like also the entertainment industry, like the songs we were talking about earlier that are just like a product of like 10 writers in a room making a hit. Like I have to remind myself that like, okay, music is something like attached to my soul and my self-expression and my creativity for me. But not every listener out there wants that Like,
Yeah.
some people just want entertainment. Some people just want something they can bop their head to and feels like summer. You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and that's why like there's a radio formula.
Yeah.
For a lot of songs, because that's what some people aren't intellectual and they just want like a song they can sing the hook, sing along with the hook on their way to work or wherever they're going. Like,
or they are intellectual in their other phase of life, and like when they're on the weekend and they're at the beach, they don't want to think about anything.
Yeah.
They just want to sip tequila.
Yeah.
And so if there's a song that's talking about sipping tequila,
that's my
then
jam.
that's like, they're like, this is perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've written I've been a part of song projects. Some of the funnest songs to write are the ones where you're not taking it seriously at all. Mm-hmm. You're like, let's just give the people what they want. And you end up writing something and you're like, God damn, I hate how much I like this. Like, I hate how much
Feel a little bit guilty. Yeah.
It's always that story where the artist gets told by the label that they need to write a hit, and so they write it out of spite, and then it becomes a hit. That's
ironic as hell. Yeah. But also you can feel sometimes when the artist, like when your favorite artist has a couple of those songs on the album that are just, it's not them.
Yeah.
Or they're trying like a flavor or a style that is popular or trendy, but it's so unauthentic to themselves. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, ooh, who okayed this? Why did you do, like, this is not you. Well, that's Skip.
Also funny how like getting to that kind of first tier of level of success can kind of like rob you of personal choice with your like music. So, you know, they get to a certain success level because one of their songs went viral. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, okay, now you have to make 10 more of that song.
Yeah.
And you get put in a box. You're like, well, okay, I'm known for this song, but that's not all that I am. And you see it with artists who try to refabricate the thing that like made them hit big. Mm-hmm. And then the fans are like, oh, this just feels all the same. Yeah. And it's boring. Yeah. Like if you have a hit debut, so much pressure in that. And they're like, how can I in labels and management are like, how can you refabric that debut?
How are you going to follow up?
It's like, well, no. Like the follow-up album should just be a new album, not how can we recreate but differently like the thing that worked for me. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people get like hung up on that the curse of like the
album 2 curse.
Yeah.
Can you think of any good examples of artists that you like that have had a really successful album 2 after like a really breakthrough debut?
Oh man, a really successful second album? There's probably so many, but like you asking me that question, I can't physically think of it.
Yeah. For me, Nas comes to mind.
Yeah.
And his debut, Illmatic, is considered like the gospel of hip hop to a lot of people, like top 10, top 5 hip hop albums ever. And he was like 18 when he made that, and it was just a masterpiece. And he had all the best producers from New York, and timeless album. And then it was like, okay, what are you gonna do? Yeah. And he made It Was Written, which was his second album, which to me is, I personally like that album more than I like Illmatic. And it's like, it's so sophisticated, and the rhymes and just everything are just like, he just brought it. He wasn't trying to make Illmatic 2.0. It was just like, I'm me, and look what I've still got in the gas tank.
I love that.
Incredible.
When artists continue to improve, like, ooh, that's what everyone wants. Mm-hmm. Like to keep expanding and getting better and better and better. Like, but there is a pressure to beating yourself, like being like, okay, I got to beat what I did previously.
Of course.
But no, I'm not too sure. I can't think of like one where I'm thinking about.
I'm sure a whole bunch will pop into your head when you leave.
Oh, the moment I'm home.
Yeah. And have a whole list of them.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I forgot to plug the phone in. I know Pro Tools is fine, but I just want to make sure that, because we're almost at 3 hours.
Oh my gosh, maybe we should wrap this up.
It's 2 hours and 45 minutes. Well, it's still going. Okay.
How do we end this?
I don't know. I usually just say something really deep. No. I guess let's bring it home. Let's see. you're working on a solo project.
Yes.
This episode will be out in a couple of weeks, so
Yeah.
anything we're talking about now isn't really a secret, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe let people know, like one or two artists right now that you're currently working on, like some names that you're proud of that they should go and check out.
So Isabeau, she put out Trippin' in Love, and we're probably going to end up working on something again in the near future. So she's someone that I think you should just check out. But the artist I'm working with, Darren, it's not finished. This is his debut, so there's nothing really to listen to.
Okay.
But the first project I did in my home studio is still something I'm really proud of. So Stephanie Sparrow, if you like very like nature, magic folk is the best way I could describe it. It's very feminine. Yeah.
Okay, so I was listening to it all day yesterday, and I felt like I was in like an enchanted forest.
Yes.
Like, that's so interesting that you said nature,
We wanted it to feel like you like entered an enchanted forest.
100% did that.
Yeah,
Wow.
explored.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
it was so good.
I'm glad that that's how it resonated. So I think
atmospheric as hell.
And yeah, she got put on a lot of local like yoga studios, like yoga playlists.
Of course.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Which is like amazing.
Yeah.
So definitely her. And then my personal stuff, it's funny, like what's on Spotify, I'm still proud of it. But what I'm going to put out next spring is like going to be such a descent from it, but like a coming home to, because it feels like it's always been there in me. And now I'm finally sounding like the way I've always thought that I could
finally
sound.
Ready. Yeah.
And it took doing it the way that I've always wanted to do it, but was limited to do. Like I've always wanted to do in a big studio. So I went to the warehouse. I got, great session players, and we played song after song live in the room together. That's always how I've wanted to make a record. And it's always been the way that my songs feel the best.
Mm-hmm.
And budget wise, it took a long time to get there, but I finally did it. And so that's why I feel like it feels authentic to me, because before I was always trying to work within the budget of like what I had at my exposure, being a 20-something in Vancouver and working odd jobs, just financially never had the expendable income to pull the trigger on that. So it took to get into 30 and being like, all right, I've got a good cushion now, financially okay, let's bleed some money into this. And I'm excited to keep working it out. And so look out sometime in March of 2024.
Okay.
That's when it's going to come out. So it's
Sweet.
a waiting game for anyone listening to this. But
Okay.
I'm excited.
Great. Well, we'll have to have you back around the time that comes out.
Yeah.
That'll be, and we can, talk. Once it's out, we can go into more detail and maybe the production and how it all came together. Very cool. So, thank you for doing this. This has been
fun.
This like
We've
3
been talking
hours
way
just
too
flew
long.
by.
Yeah.
This was so much fun. Such a good time. Anne Lloyd.
Anne Lloyd, yes.
And Max Deshaw on Demo to Lemo. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.
Woohoo! Woohoo!